Thank you all very much. And Bob, thank you for that introduction. Bob's been helping me for a long time. I guess he doesn't know any better. And speaking of help from a long time, a brand new guy in town, a guy who I told him that being mayor, I think, is the toughest job in America. They know where you live, and every time you walk in the grocery store, you get questions. But congratulations, Mr. Mayor. And I think that you've been doing a good job. Mayor Brandon Johnson. Look, there's a guy that helped me more than, I can say this without equivocation, helped me more than anybody in America get elected last time. A single person, your governor. He stepped up, he raised money, he raised support. Governor, you're the best. Thank you for being such a good friend. I really mean it. And I like hanging around with heroines like Tammy Duckworth. Tammy, God love you, you're the best too, I tell you. But you know what? My good friend Dick Durbin, and he is a good friend, we've worked together a long, long time in the United States Senate. He's the single most effective senator in getting things done. That's not a joke. It's not just Judiciary Committee. He's made sure that we got more judges appointed. We've appointed more African American women to the federal bench than every other president combined. And he got the first and brightest, Justice Ketanji Brown. I said I was going to put a black woman on the court, and he put her on the court for me. He put her on the court for me. Dick, you really are the best, man. And by the way, when I have questions about just about anything at all, beyond the Judiciary Committee, I still call him anyway for his advice. So thank you. And Representative Danny Davis. Danny, you've been a good friend for a long time. He's always there. And to all the elected officials, member of Congress, elected officials here today, thank you. Thank you for the welcome, and welcome me to Chicago. You know, first quarter of the 20th century, the poet Carl Sandburg described Chicago as a city of big shoulders. A city of big shoulders. He was describing the big shoulders of a working class American town who were building this city. At the same time, building the middle class. I'm here in Chicago today for the first quarter of the 21st century to talk about the economic vision for this country. The economy that grows the economy from the middle out and the bottom up instead of just the top down. When that happens, everybody does well. The wealthy still do it, everybody does well. The poor have a ladder up, and the wealthy still do well. We all do well. This vision is a fundamental break from the economic theory that has failed America's middle class for decades now. It's called trickle-down economics, fundamental economics, trickle-down. The idea was, it's belief that we should cut taxes for the wealthy and big corporations. And I know something about big corporations. There's more corporations in Delaware incorporated than every other state in the union combined. I want them to do well, but I'm tired of waiting for the trickle down. It doesn't come very quickly. Not much trickle down at my dad's kitchen table growing up. And it's a belief that we should shrink public investment in infrastructure and public education, shrink it. That we should let good jobs get shipped overseas, and we actually have a tax policy that encourages them to go overseas to save money. We should let big corporations amass more power while making it harder to join a union. I meant what I said when I said I'm going to be the most pro-union president in American history, and I make no apologies for it. My predecessor, if my mom were here, God bless his soul, my predecessor enacted the latest iteration of the failed theory. Tax cuts for the wealthy. It wasn't paid for, and the estimated cost of his tax cut was $2 trillion. $2 trillion. Now Republicans are at it again, pushing tax cuts for large corporations and the wealthy, and adding trillions of dollars to the deficit. Trillions. Folks, let me say it as clearly as I can. The trickle-down approach failed the middle class. It failed America. It blew up the deficit. It increased inequity, and it weakened our infrastructure. It stripped the dignity, pride, and hope out of communities, one after another, particularly through the Midwest, Western Pennsylvania, heading west. People working as hard as ever couldn't get ahead because it's harder to buy a home, pay for college education, start a business, retire with dignity. The first time in a generation, the path of the middle class seemed out of reach. And I don't think it's hyperbole, I think it's a fact, no matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent. I knew we couldn't go back to the same failed policies when I ran. So I came into office determined to change the economic direction of this country, to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal and Financial Times began to call Bidenomics. I didn't come up with the name. I really didn't. I now claim it, but they're the ones that used it first. I got asked by a press person this morning, getting on the helicopter in Washington, why, when I asked you about Bidenomics a long time ago, you said you didn't know what it was. I said, I didn't name it Bidenomics. I didn't realize the Economist and the Wall Street Journal did. But I think it's a plan that I'm happy to call Bidenomics. And guess what? Bidenomics is working. When I took office, the pandemic was raging and our economy was reeling. Supply chains were broken, millions of people unemployed, hundreds of thousands of small businesses on the verge of closing after so many had already closed. Literally hundreds of thousands on the verge of closing. Today, the U.S. has the highest economic growth rate, leading the world economies since the pandemic, the highest in the world. As Dick said, with his help, we created 13.4 million new jobs. More jobs in 2 years than any president has ever made in 4 and 2. And folks, it's no accident. That's Bidenomics in action. Bidenomics is about building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. And there are 3 fundamental changes that we decided to make with the help of the Congress. We've been able to do it. First, making smart investments in America. Second, educating and empowering American workers to grow the middle class. And third, promoting competition to lower costs to help small businesses. Here's what I mean by all this. Under trickle-down economics, it didn't matter whether you made things as long as you helped the company's bottom line. Even if that meant seeing jobs in industries go overseas for cheaper labor. Supply chains and key products moved overseas, like China and much of Asia. The entire towns and communities, from where I live all the way out there and through the Midwest, were shut down, hollowed out. I mean, literally hollowed out. All over the country, parents have to say to their, many of you, all elected officials, heard people tell you this, had to say to their children, honey, I lost my job. We can't live here anymore. We got to move. Trickle down also meant slashing public investment on things that help drive long-term growth and helped America lead the world in innovation. We used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. By the time I came to office, that was down to 0.7%. We used to be #1 in the world in research and development. That's what we're known for. Now we rank #9 in the world. China decades ago was #8 in the world. Now it's #2 in the world. And other nations are closing in fast. We used to have the best infrastructure in the world, roads, bridges, etc. But then we fell to rated 13th best investment in infrastructure. 2 to 13. How can you have the best economy in the world without the best infrastructure in the world? How do you get product from one place to another? I was out in Pittsburgh recently, the city of bridges. Bridges collapsing all over the nation. You've seen on television, railroad bridges collapsing. Bidenomics, we're turning this around. We're supporting targeted investments. We're strengthening America's economic security, our national security, our energy security, and our climate security. I designed and we signed a bipartisan infrastructure law. It's already announced, and I heard some of the speakers before touting some of it. It's already announced 35,000 projects across the country. Think of it this way. Nearly a century ago, Franklin Roosevelt's Rural Electrification Act, rural electrification, brought electricity to millions of Americans in rural America. 70 years ago, Dwight Eisenhower launched the Interstate Highway System, the largest infrastructure project to date in history. That's what the bipartisan infrastructure law does. It will be for our kids and grandkids, only bigger. Just last week, we announced our plan to bring affordable high-speed internet to end the decade of unaffordable and inaccessible internet to every home in America, every small business in America. And to no one's surprise, it's bringing along some converts. People strenuously opposed, voting against it when we had this going on. This was going to bankrupt America. Well, there's a guy named Tuberville, senator from Alabama, who announced that he strongly opposed the legislation. Now he's hailing its passage. Here's what he said, quote, "It's great to see Alabama receive critical funds to boost ongoing broadband efforts." We're replacing every single lead pipe in this country and putting our children's health back directly. 400,000 schools, 10 million homes. We're fixing crumbling bridges, upgrading our power grid, renovating our airports and ports. And Dick, one of you talked about that, how important that is for the Great Lakes as well. Anyway, last week we reopened I-95 back where I live. And you go up the East Coast. It's one of the most important links in the entire East Coast. Well, guess what? A guy driving a truck knocked down the whole bridge and the whole block, 4 lanes of the highway. I went up there and I said, we're going to get this the #1 project to get done. Within 1 week of my being there, 2 weeks of happening, tanker trucks that crashed and caused this overpass that has 150,000 vehicles travel on it every day and 14,000 trucks. It's critical to our economy. We did it with union workers. We closed all the loopholes. We used all American products, all American materials. We used federal infrastructure projects. Made in America. Made in America, not a slogan. It's actually happening. You know, when Roosevelt passed the legislation in the 30s about unions being able to be engaged, everybody thinks they just legalize unions. It said we should encourage unions. There was a little provision there that very few presidents paid attention to. It said, buy American. That meant that if a president was given money by the Congress to build, say, a new Deccan aircraft carrier, whatever it was, he or she was supposed to use 100% American labor and 100% American products. It hardly happened. We get exceptions down to 30%, et cetera. I changed all that. We're all now investing in key industries of the future, making targeted investments to promote domestic production of semiconductors, batteries, electric cars, clean energy. Under the trickle-down economic theory was that public investment would discourage private investment. Give me a break. We went to see a whole lot of major corporations that said, are you more or less likely to invest if the government invests? Overwhelmingly. They had it backwards. They said, no, we're more likely to invest if the government invests. Public investment declined here at home. Industries that we invented started to move overseas, like semiconductors. I want to remind you, America invented these chips. Small computer chips the size of the tip of your finger that affect nearly everything in your life. From whether your cell phone functions, your automobiles can be built, refrigerators work, it goes on, into sophisticated weapon system. It's all in that little, without that computer chip, we got a real problem. But over time, we went from producing 40% of those world chips down to 10%. Not anymore. Biden economics means industries of the future are going to grow right here at home. At home. I mean it. Not a joke. Under Bidenomics, we've already had over $490 billion in private investment commitments. $490 billion from U.S. companies and companies around the world coming to the United States of America. Working with our global partners, Americans' investments in clean energy technology are going to reduce carbon emissions, continue to lower the cost of wind. You talked about the wind farms you're talking about. You know, it's already cheaper. Wind and solar are already significantly cheaper than coal and oil. You're not going to see anybody building a new coal-fired plant in America. Not just because I'd like to pass a law to say that. It's too expensive. It doesn't work anymore. Solar power is not just here, but around the world. And we used to be the center of building these solar panels. We're coming back and doing it again. America's going to lead again. Look, it's a win for the United States and a win for the world. That builds on my decision to rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement on the first day I came to office. The first day. And by the way, my predecessor talked a lot about increasing manufacturing. Remember Infrastructure Week? Infrastructure Week became Infrastructure Week and week and week and week and week. It never happened. We got Infrastructure Decade done right off the bat. But in reality, construction of manufacturing facilities here on U.S. soil grew only 2% on my predecessor's watch. In 4 years, 2%. On my watch, it's grown nearly 100% in 2 years. 100%. With the help of all the members of Congress that are here, and I'm not being solicitous. Look, Weirton, West Virginia, where a steel mill closed in the beginning of this century, in 2001 or 2, in that range. It employed thousands, had thousands of good paying jobs. They were lost. But today, with the help of the Inflation Reduction Act, a new plant's being built, building iron air batteries, which are going to help store energy. And these batteries are going to help store energy. And it's being built on the same exact site, bringing back 750 good paying jobs, bringing back a sense of pride and hope for the future for all the people of Weirton and surrounding areas. I believe every American willing to work hard should be able to say where they grew up and stay where they grew up. That's Bidenomics. You know, my dad used to have an expression, Joey, and I give my word, as we say. My dad was a well-read guy, never got to go to college, and a hard-working gentleman. We had dinner where we incidentally had conversation and incidentally ate. My dad used to say, remember, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. And I mean this, I give my word. He would say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck, Joey. It's about your dignity. It's about pride. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. Think about it. I mean, literal sense, think about that. It's about your dignity, how you're treated, and being able to make a living you can tell your kids it's going to be okay. The second big part of Bidenomics is empowering American workers. When I took office, unemployment was over 6%. With the American Rescue Plan, we provided relief and support directly to working class families. Our economy came roaring back. Unemployment dipped below 4% by the end of my first year in office. Now it's been below 4% for the longest stretch in 50 years of American history. And I must admit I concentrated on it, but we've seen with the help of Jesse Jackson's legacy and a lot of other people here, we've seen record low unemployment for African Americans. Record low unemployment for African Americans and Hispanic workers with disabilities. The lowest unemployment rate in 70 years for American women, and you make up half the economy and probably 2/3 of the brain. No, really, think about it. To pause for a second, when I was trying to name me a time when you thought any Democrat would get the endorsement within a week. Every single environmental group out there, the AFL-CIO, the women's groups. I mean, here's the deal. When I sat with the AFL-CIO, when I sat with the IBW, starting when I ran last time, I said, here's the deal, though. I'm going to be the most pro-American, most pro-union president in history, but you've got to employ more women, you've got to attract more African Americans, and you've got to attract more minorities. They have. They're going around. It's beginning to change. In every industry. Anyway, I go to these sites where they're training. By the way, the other thing I've told labor guys, you got to brag a little bit more about what you do. You realize to get a license to be an electrician in this town or any other, you got to essentially go to 4 years of college. You have to go through an apprenticeship that takes you 4 years to 5, depending, or you can't get a job. You get paid a little bit, but you can't get your license to be an electrician, a labor electrician, until that happens. Look, pay for low-wage workers has grown at the fastest pace in over 2 decades. Full employment means workers, especially low-wage workers, having more bargaining power to demand good pay, to secure good jobs. And this is a thing that isn't consistent with whether people think that we're moving in the right direction. Job satisfaction, based on every poll, is at a 36-year high. More people are satisfied with their jobs than any time in 36 years. And the shame of working-age Americans in the workforce, the share of them is the highest it's been in 20 years. Remember what they were saying? Biden policy isn't working. He's just paying people not to work. People on the sidelines. Well, guess what? Every single day in 4 years before I took office, you may remember, I took a lot of criticism in my presidency. Republicans charged me we're encouraging people to stay home, not work. Well, they were wrong. The evidence is clear. Americans are back to work who've been on the sidelines, and they want to come back. And we're going to continue this progress and make sure every American has the training and education to participate in this new economy. We've increased Pell Grants, made landmark investments in historic black universities. We've invested more in registered apprenticeships and center career technology education programs than any previous administration in American history. Because of this new economy, we don't need everyone to have a 4-year degree. It's great if you can get one. We're trying to make it easier for you to get one. But you don't need it to get a good paying job anymore. Think of this. How many of you remember going back to high school and they had shop class? And they had classes where people could learn if they were interested in working with their hands. They don't have them very much anymore, anywhere around the country. Well, my wife teaches at a community college, full-time still. She has an expression. She said, any country that outcompetes us, out-educates us, will outcompete us. We're not going to let that happen. That's why we're investing significantly in education. I'm determined to keep fighting for universal pre-K and free community college. We're also fighting to make child care more affordable, because we know one benefit is that it opens up significant opportunities for parents to be able to go back and join the workforce. We're also making it easier to empower workers by making it easier to join a union. As I said, I promised to be the most pro-union president in history, and I tell business leaders all the time, our union workers are the best in the world. It takes 4 to 5 years in that apprenticeship. It's like going to college. They'll do the right job on time. Long-term cost for business is less. Addressing the 40-year decline in unionization by supporting project labor agreements, collective bargaining, prevailing wage laws. That's the reason today America's support unions is higher than it's been in 60 years. 60 years. And by the way, I met with the Business Roundtable and others. They said, why am I so pro-union? I said, because it helps you. It really does. Think about it. The total cost of a major project goes down when you have the best workers in the world doing it. Not a joke. It's true. It lasts longer. You don't have to worry about whether that socket's going to work. Look, young people are organizing new companies and industries. I've indicated to labor leaders they must expand their ranks. As I said, more women, more minorities. That's what they got to do. Third part of Biden economics is promoting competition. Because when companies have to compete on a level playing field, they have to work harder to attract customers and recruit and retrain workers. Some of you business people here know that well. But under the trickle-down economic theory, 3/4 of U.S. industries grew more consecrated. I'm thinking I didn't go to Mass. They were moving to diminish competition. Well, that may have been made things easier for big corporations. But for everybody else, it made it harder and more expensive. It got harder for small businesses to compete. It stifled integration. It reduced wages for workers. And it made our supply chains more vulnerable. So folks, that's been the Republican plan so far. Good for big business, bad for everybody else. It's not even that good for big business anymore. When I came to office with a very different plan, a limited concentration of power at the expense of consumers. The cops are back in the beat enforcing antitrust laws. My administration is working to crack down on what we used to call non-compete agreements. We still call them that. These prevent 30 million Americans, from security guards to retail workers, from walking across the street to the same kind of business and getting a higher pay, getting $5 more a week or $10 more a week. Non-compete agreements? It's one thing to have non-compete agreements when you're dealing with trade secrets. It's another thing when you're doing the same thing of flipping a hamburger and you're going to get 5 cents more by walking across the street to a different place. We promoted, we're supporting small businesses. You know, Vice President Harris has prioritized providing support and capital for small business owners, including for rural minorities and women entrepreneurs, including through a brand new program that's already helping deliver billions of dollars in growth capital to small businesses in every state. We've seen a record 10.5 million applications, 10.5 million applications for folks looking to start a small business just in the last 2 years, 10.5. Every one of those applications is an application of hope, hope. Competition also means lowering costs for consumers. Bringing down inflation remains one of my top priorities. Today, inflation is less than half of what it was a year ago. And that inflation caused by Russia and by the war in Ukraine and by what's going on. But we knew we had to do more. There's more than one way to bring down costs. Another expression my dad used to use, for real. He'd say, Joey, he said, at the end of the month, the question is, after you pay all your bills, do you have just a little left for breathing room? Just a little less for breathing room. All your bills paid, do you have anything left? Well, inflation eats into that, obviously. But guess what? Bringing down the cost of medication goes a long way to giving you a little more. That's why through the Inflation Reduction Act, we finally gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices like the VA does now. We've been trying to get this done, Dick and I, for decades in the Senate. This time we finally beat Big Pharma for the first time. You know, the same drug made by the same American company, sold in Chicago, is more expensive than that same drug sold in Toronto, Great Britain, France, Germany, any city you can name, for real. Now seniors on Medicare are paying as much as who were paying $400 a month for insulin last year are now paying $35 a month. Because guess what? You know how much it costs to make that insulin? 10 TEN dollars. Package it, maybe 12 total. And the guy who invented the insulin didn't even ask for a patent because he wanted everybody to have access to it. We're just finishing the first round of negotiating drug prices. And we'll save the taxpayers this year $160 billion. That's like a tax cut. Lowers the cost of prescription drugs and it lowers the federal deficit as well. We're expanding health care coverage for more Americans, building on Barack's Affordable Care Act. You know why we're doing that? I'm proud to strengthen that act, saving average families $800 a year on their health care premiums. We're also fighting to end junk fees. Most people don't think of it that way. Well, here's what a junk fee is. They can add up to hundreds of dollars a month for a family. Like that extra fee when you say, I want my child to sit next to me when I take him to see Grandpapa on the West Coast. It's not listed now. They're listing it now. Hotel resort fees. You don't realize, you're not told they're going to be, that ad in television? Mine is $200, his is $180. Well, guess what? Or the one that bothers me the most is overdraft fees for banks. The banks made $7.7 billion a year on overdraft fees. You overdraft a check, you get a penalty. It's one of the leading bank presidents, God love him, he's passed away, but he had a yacht. The name of the yacht was Overdraft. Swear to God. Well, guess what? There are going to be no more overdraft fees. Folks, we're doing this, doing all this, reducing the deficit at the same time. Just in my first 2 years in office, my team and I have reduced the deficit by $1.7 trillion, more than any president has. Just in 2 years. And the budget agreement I negotiate without having to give away anything of consequence reduced the deficit by another $1 trillion. You know, reversing 40 years of Republican trickle-down economics that helped few but hurt the middle class, it's going to take some time. But we're in a place where some big pieces, and we're moving in a direction where we can get some more done and people will see it. What I'm doing, and I knew I'd have to do this, all those major legislations we pass, people go, that's great, but it takes time to get it out in the field. It takes time for them to see it. And I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. I'm here to say we have a plan that's turning things around incredibly quickly. Well, we have more work to do. For example, does anyone here think the federal tax system is fair? Raise your hand. No matter how much money you make. We're going to make it fair by eliminating loopholes for crypto traders, hedge fund managers. Big oil made $200 billion last year and got a $30,000 tax break, $30 billion tax break. We're going to get billionaires to pay up a little bit, at least the minimum tax. You know, when we began, there were 750, before the pandemic, 750 billionaires in America. Now there are 1,000. You know how much their average tax is? They pay federal tax? 8% taxes. No billionaire should pay lower tax rate than a school teacher, a firefighter, a cop. I mean, this is... I'm not talking about the old days of 70% tax. I'm talking about a fair shot. If they just paid the top tax rate that exists now, which is 130%, we'd raise billions and billions of dollars, lowering the deficit, allowing us to pay for so much more we have to do. That's the next phase of this fight, making the tax code fair for everyone, making the wealthy, the super wealthy, and big corporations begin to pay their fair share without raising taxes at all on the middle class. I made a commitment when I got elected. No one in America making under $400,000 ever have to pay a single penny more in federal taxes as long as I'm president. And I've kept that promise. And $400,000 is a lot of money where I come from. Let me close with this. When I came to office, I had a fundamental decision to make. We're going to continue trickle-down economics as a policy that's failed time and again, that grew inequality, that saw jobs go overseas, that saw, and you've seen it out here, towns hollowed out. I ran on the promise I was going to end this, and that I began to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. We're not going to continue down the trickle-down path as long as I'm president. This is the moment. We're finally going to make a break and move away from an economy that has existed in a fundamentally different direction. Here's the simple truth about trickle-down economics. It didn't represent the best of American capitalism, let alone America. It represented a moment where we walked away, and how many in this country, from how this country was built, how this city was built. Bidenomics is about the future. Bidenomics is just another way of saying, restore the American dream, because it worked before. It's rooted in what we've always worked best at in this country, investing in America, investing in Americans. Because when we invest in our people, we strengthen the middle class, we see the economy grow, that benefits all Americans. That's the American dream. 40 years of trickle down limited that dream, except for those at the top. Too many, for too long, have seemingly suggested that it's only available if you have a 4-year college degree. You can work at a teaching or work at a tech center. These new factories that are opening, these fabs that are opening for semiconductors, without a college degree, you're going to make $100,000 to $130,000 a year working in those fabs. $100,000 to $130,000 a year. But I believe that every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job no matter where they are. In the heartland, in small towns, in every part of this country, to raise their kids on a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. That's Bidenomics. I think the economic philosophy is not going to restore the American dream that we have now, that philosophy, but there's new and will. It's going to help, and I think it's going to help lessen the division of this country by bringing us back together. It makes it awful hard to demagogue something when it's working, although they do it all the time. I've long said, and I mean this, I was on the Tibetan Plateau with Xi Jinping. I traveled 17,000 miles with him. I've spoken with him more than any other head of state because it started when I was vice president, and President Hu was the president, and he was the vice president. We knew he was going to be successful. It was inappropriate for Barack to spend that time with him, but I spent a lot of time with him. I met alone with him, just he and I, and a simultaneous interpreter 68 times, 68 hours, 68 times, more than 68 hours. By the way, I turned in all my notes. But, this is God's truth. He asked me, we're in the Tibetan Plateau, and he asked me, he said, can you define America for me? And I said, yes, in one word, and I meant it. Possibilities. Possibilities. We're a land of possibilities. And I told him it's never been a good bet to bet against America. Never. And I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future. I swear to God. I've never been more optimistic. We just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hello, South Carolina. Thank you, Nikki, for that introduction. You wonder what I'm kicking here. I'm kicking this stand-in, but it's not working. How about that? All right. Maybe I stand on and I'll be 6'4". Folks, thank you for being here. And I want to particularly thank my good friend Jim Clyburn. The truth of the matter is, all of you know in South Carolina, I wouldn't be standing here were it not for Jim Clyburn. Jim has been one of the most consequential leaders in South Carolina history, in my view. He's tough, he's loyal, he's principled, and he let me, I'm going to tell you something. If he has your back, he always has your back. And Jim is good to be back in your home with you and your daughter. And look, former Mayor Steve Benjamin couldn't be here today, and you all remember Steve as your mayor, because he's traveling with his family, and it's great to have him here, have him part of our team. But his mom and dad are here. By the way, if you have seats, sit down. I'm sorry. I once said, everybody take a seat, and there were no seats. I said, Biden's so stupid, he didn't know there were no seats. Anyway, also want to thank the leadership of Enphase and Flex for hosting us. You know, I'm here to talk about what we're doing to invest in America. And I mean invest in America, all of America, starting here in South Carolina. And to talk about the progress we made in building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not trickling down. When you build from the middle out and the bottom up, everybody does well. The wealthy still do very well. But that trickle-down economy, not a whole lot dropped on my dad's kitchen table growing up. It's all part of an economic vision for this country. I came to office determined, to the point of some of my own team thought I was too determined, to change the economic direction of this country, to move trickle-down economics and get rid of it where everyone from the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, called the program Bidenomics. I'm not sure they meant it as a compliment at the time. Our plan is working. And one of the things I'm proudest of is working everywhere, not just in the coast and big cities like previous recoveries. This time, investment is working in factories being built and jobs being created, happening in rural America, the heartland, all across America. In communities that have been left out and hollowed out. This is what it looks like across the country. Over 13 million new jobs since I've been elected to office. More jobs than any president's ever created in the first 2 years. nearly 800,000 manufacturing jobs, including 14,000 in this state alone. This state alone. And again, that's more in 2 years than was created in 4 years in any other administration. Unemployment has been below 4% for the longest time in 50 years. Inflation is less than half of what it was a year ago, and we're continuing to work on it. You know, I know we have more to do. Bringing down inflation remains one of my top priorities. Job satisfaction nationally is at a 36-year high. The share of working-age Americans in the workforce is as high as it's been in 30 years. Remember they used to say, Biden spent all this money to keep people from working? People are off the sidelines. 20 years high. Higher than every single one of my predecessors. And to pay for low-wage workers, the pay for low-wage workers, has grown at the fastest pace in 2 decades. And folks, it's no accident. It's Bidenomics in action. Trickle-down economics has failed the country for decades. It means slashing public investment on things that helped America lead the world in innovation. You know, we used to invest 2% of our entire gross domestic product in research and development. You know what it is now? 0.7%. We used to be ranked #1 in the world in research and development. Know where we're ranked now? #9. China's #8 a decade ago, and now China's #2. And other countries are closing in fast. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. We used to have the best infrastructure in the world, rated #1. Now we're rated #13 in the world in infrastructure. How can you have the best economy in the world and not have the best infrastructure in the world? Under my predecessor, Infrastructure Week became a punchline. Every month. Anyway, I won't get into it. On my watch, we're making infrastructure a decade headline. A decade. Yesterday, we announced that since I took office, we've attracted $500 billion, $497 billion in private investment in American manufacturing, both here and around the world. It's historic. And it's Bidenomics in action. Instead of exporting jobs to cheaper labor costs, what we did for decades, we're creating jobs here and exporting American product. Product, not jobs. That's the story here in South Carolina. Earlier, we heard the leadership of Enphase say that $60 million they're investing here. Well, that's 1,800 jobs across the country, and up 600 permanent jobs right here in South Carolina. All a direct result of the so-called Inflation Reduction Act we wrote and passed. Well, that's the legislation of the past where so much money is coming in to make all this happen. And by the way, parenthetically, you're going to hear about the deficit. I cut the deficit $1.7 trillion in 2 years. Nobody's ever done that. Cut the debt 1.7. This generates income. It generates growth. Enphase first commercialized the component that converts solar energy into electricity. All that solar energy doesn't do a whole lot of good if you can't do it and convert it into electricity. It's called, they invented a thing called a solar microinverter. Jobs that used to go to Mexico, India, Romania, and China are now coming home to South Carolina. Now Enphase is partnering with Flex to make these parts here in South Carolina. And today, they're shipping their first microinverters made in America. Made in America. And the good news is 90% of these jobs require intelligence but don't require a college degree. And Flex is working with Midlands Technical College in Columbia to develop training and pathways so folks can get these jobs. Since I took office, we've seen over 60 domestic manufacturing announcements all across the solar supply chain. One of the biggest is in Dalton, Georgia. You may find it hard to believe, but that's Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. I'll be there for the groundbreaking. Look, just today, the Department of Energy announced new incentives for companies to bring solar power manufacturing back to our shores. We're in a real race. China's ahead of us. This is another step in helping us meet the goal of 100% clean, renewable energy electricity by 2035. By 2035, all electricity in America is going to be generated by clean energy. That's a big deal. It's saving billions of tons going into the air, pollution. We see the same story in semiconductors. Those small little computer chips the size of the tip of your finger that affect nearly everything in our lives, from your cell phone to automobiles to refrigerators to the most sophisticated weapon system. They need these. And guess what? America invented these chips. We're the ones that invented them. We sophisticated those chips. We made them what they are. But over time, we went from producing nearly 40% of the world's chips down to less than 10%. That's why we designed and I signed the CHIPS and Science Act. All these names don't mean much so you know what they produce, because I knew we had to reclaim America's leadership. Now, all over the country, semiconductor companies are investing a record hundreds of billions of dollars to bring chip production back home in Ohio, New York, Arizona, all across, like outside Columbus, Ohio. Intel is investing in 1,000 acres outside of Ohio, $20 billion. $20 billion. It's going to take 7,000 people to build the two, they call them fabs, factories, and it's going to take 5,000 permanent workers. Near Syracuse, Micron is investing up to $100 billion over the next 20 years, beginning now. In Phoenix, Arizona, TSMC is investing $40 billion, producing thousands of good-paying jobs. As I said, for example, in Ohio, those 7,000 jobs building the facility are going to generate economic growth in that entire region outside of Columbus, because they're generating, they bring along, you need stores, you need drugstores, you need a lot of things to maintain those jobs. And we're also seeing 3,000 jobs, those 3,000 jobs working in the fabs. You can make $100,000 a year. That's the average salary. And you don't need a college degree. Making 100 grand. The middle class, this is a game changer. We're investing in the American agenda is about bringing supply chains home. Clean energy future, made in America. Before the pandemic, supply chains weren't something most Americans thought about. If I said to you 6 years ago, we're worried about a supply chain, you look at me like, huh? Well, I would have looked at you the same way. But today, after delays in parts and products, everybody knows why supply chains matter. We know for too long, China's dominated the production of raw materials needed for critical products. That's why we're building alliances with our friends all across the world, increasing our production here at home to create alternative sources for the minerals we need. Our goal is to bring full battery supply chain home. We create a battery belt stretching from Michigan to Georgia. In Chester County, South Carolina, Albemarle is investing $1.5 billion to process lithium for electric vehicle batteries. That's not only create 300 permanent jobs, but it'll lift up a whole community. Restore some pride. It matters. The lithium will power components like it's going to be being made in redwood materials near Charleston, where the company's making the largest investment in the history of this state, $3.5 billion to build a battery materials manufacturing plant, creating 1,500 jobs. That's another community changer. It's a game changer. And those materials will go into batteries that will be recycled by companies like Serbia Solutions, which is investing $300 million here in Richland County, creating another 300 permanent jobs. That's community after community after community. There's been that change, and it's on its way. You change enough communities, it's going to change the state, it's going to change the country. In Jim Clyburn's Institute, Promega, Energy Storage Technologies, is investing $279 million to manufacture batteries, to store energy, to power the grid. Look, what do you think we have said if I came when I was here trying to get the nomination 3 years ago? And I told you, while I was campaigning, that we'd see this kind of investment in South Carolina, billions of dollars. I think you would have been a little skeptical. But that's why I fought so hard for the things I wanted to do. Didn't get much help from the other team, but that didn't stop us from getting it done. And that's going to transform America. All told, since I signed the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act and the law, companies have announced $11 billion in manufacturing and clean energy investments just in South Carolina. $11 billion. Companies across the county, across the country, are expanding factories, building new ones, creating tens of thousands of good-paying jobs, most of which don't require a four-year degree. And when I say every job in America should be a good job, including a free and fair choice to join a union, I mean it. That's right. Every venture to manufacture clean energy technology will be made stronger by collective bargaining relationships. But that's up to you to decide. It's not just manufacturing. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've already announced over 35,000 projects all across America, like the Brent Spence Bridge, which is a $1 billion operation over the Ohio River from Ohio to Kentucky. And today in New York, we're investing a record to $1 billion to renew the Hudson Tunnel. You walk through that tunnel, it was built 100 years ago. It's fallen apart. You'll be able to go through it 100 miles an hour instead of 30 miles an hour. Up in Union County, South Carolina, we're building 6 bridges critical to moving people and goods across this region. Each bridge is over 60 years old with weight and volume restrictions that cause detours, congestion, and supply chain delays. The oldest one is where South Carolina 49 crosses the Tiger River. The biggest one is right here in Columbia, Malfunction Junction. You all know it. How many years you've been talking about fixing Malfunction Junction? Well, now, thanks to Jim Clyburn and help from the infrastructure law, it's finally going to get fixed. It's going to get fixed. And we're removing every single lead pipe in America. More than 100,000 lead service lines go into homes here in South Carolina. And they're a risk to everyone's health, including children. So it's time to get them removed and replaced. We're helping Richland School, District 1 here in Columbia, purchase 16 new electric buses. Because guess what? The diesel buses cause asthma. They cause problems. They cause additional problems. You all remember during the pandemic that thousands of people in this state didn't have a connection to high-speed internet wherever, in their business or their home. Everybody now talks about we're going to close that digital divide. That divide between those who have reliable internet connection and those who don't. South Carolina is receiving $1 billion to close that divide, connecting every home and small business across rural America, rural South Carolina, that doesn't have reliable high-speed internet. Thanks to Jim Clyburn's Affordable Connectivity Program, fancy name, but it's real, that's saying that 359,000 South Carolinian families are already saving $30 a month on their internet bills. Look, we're doing this in communities all over the country. You can see exactly where the money's going and whether you're affected in your community here by going to invest.gov. Click on to invest.gov, put in your location, and they'll tell you what's happening in your community. You all see projects we're delivering in communities all across America. Look, implementing this legislation also has another transformative impact. All those members of Congress who voted against it suddenly realize how great it is, and they're bragging about it. As my mother would say, God love them. I want to thank Senator Graham for voting for the bipartisan infrastructure law and the CHIPS and Science Act, but I wish he had voted for the rest. Every Republican member of the Congress voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. Everyone. Every Republican member of the House in this state voted to repeal the clean energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act. That attracted all these jobs. You know, and then after that effort failed, the Republican Study Committee, which includes over 3/4 of the House Republicans, just released a plan to go at trying to repeal it all again. That hadn't stopped them, though, from claiming credit. Now the billions of dollars and thousands of jobs are coming to the United States. It's not unusual. The distinguished senator from the state of Alabama, former coach of the university, strongly opposed the bipartisan infrastructure law, is now hailing this passage. He said, quote, "Great to see Alabama receive critical funds to boost ongoing broadband efforts." Yeah, it's great. But that's all right, because I'm one of those guys that believe in conversion. Look, folks, on a very serious note, when I ran, when I got elected, when I proposed these pieces of legislation, I made a commitment that I'd be present for all Americans, whether their elected officials voted for the events or not. All Americans, wherever you voted for me or not. And I've kept my promise. In fact, some analysis have said that the laws I've signed are going to do more to help red America than blue America. Well, that's okay with me, because we're all Americans. Because my view is, wherever the need is most, that's the place we should be helping. And that's what we're doing. Because the way I look at it, the progress we're making is good for all Americans, all America. Let me close with this. I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. I'm here to say we have a plan that's turning things around quickly, but we have a lot more work to do. When I came to office, we had a fundamental decision to make. Would we continue down the trickle-down economic path, the policy that's failed us time and again, that grew inequality, that saw jobs shipped overseas, towns hollowed out? When I ran, I promised we would not continue down the trickle-down path. But here's the simple truth about trickle-down economics. It represented a moment when we walked away from how this country was built. Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream. 40 years of trickle-down limited the dream to those at the top. But I believe that every American willing to work hard should be able to get a good job no matter where they live, in the heartland, in small towns, in every part of the country. To raise their kids on a good paycheck, keep their roots where they grew up. That's the American dream. My dad used to have an expression for a grown-up, my word. He'd say, "Joey, a job's about a lot more than the paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it." That's Bidenomics. It's rooted in what always worked best for this country. Investing in America. Because when you invest in our people, when you strengthen the middle class, we see stronger economic growth that benefits everybody. I've long said it's never been a good bet to bet against America. And I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future. We just have to remember who we are, for God's sake. We're the United States of America. There is nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. So let's continue to work together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. You know, since I've been in office, we've been carrying out my economic vision. All right. We carry out my economic vision to move from trickle-down economics to what everyone on Wall Street Journal, from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, is calling Bidenomics. It's about growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, and because when that happens, the folks in the bottom have a shot. They get a chance to raise up, and the wealthy still do very well. It's not to hurt anyone at all. But today's job shows that, jobs report shows that Bidenomics is working. We added 200,000 jobs, I think 209,000 jobs last month. And all told, we've created over 13 million. I think it's 13,300,000. 2.5 years, that's more than any president ever created in a 4-year term. And folks, the unemployment rate is below 4% for 17 straight months. Not since 1960 has that occurred. Inflation continues to fall. It's less than half of what it was a year ago. And the rate of Americans without health insurance is at an all-time low. Premiums are covered. Premiums for coverage of the Affordable Care Act are $800 less per person than before I took office. And that's Bidenomics. Today, I'm joined by healthcare advocates and leaders. Many of if I started to name you all, we'd be here all night. But I want to talk about key parts of my economic plan. We're protecting consumers and reducing healthcare costs without in any way hurting insurance companies, docs, hospitals, or anybody else. You know, in my State of the Union address, I outlined our fight to end junk fees and hidden charges for companies who sneak into your bills things that you don't think you're going to pay for. Each year, those junk fees cost hundreds of dollars a month for tens of billions of dollars, weighing on down family budgets and making it harder for people to pay their bills. Junk fees may not matter to the very wealthy, and it's not the wealthy's fault, by the way, but they matter to working folks in homes like the ones I grew up in. Over the past few months, my administration has cracked down on junk fees across different industries: banking, hotels, concerts. Have a seat if you have one. Emily, thank you for that introduction. I tell you what, Mayor Kenny, thanks for the passport back into the city. I think the only reason it allows that to happen is I married a Philly girl. You know, I can't be here today, but I want to thank Governor Shapiro, who's doing a hell of a job, to my friend Senator Bobby Casey and Senator Fetterman, who've been such great partners to me. Folks, I want to also thank Representative Mary Kay Scanlon, who fights so hard for this district, and the other members of Congress, Brendan Boyle, Chrissy Houlihan, Madeline Dean, Joe Courtney. I tell you, Donald Norcross, by the way, Donald from across the way. You know, I always kid Donald when, Mr. Mayor, I say, you know, Delaware is small, so we have to fight for every inch of territory. So there was a debate on whether Delaware, the state of Delaware, owned the Delaware River along the Delaware shore up to the high water mark in New Jersey. And they said no. We went to the Supreme Court. They got something right. They said, yeah, we do. Anyway, I always kid out all the time. Folks, look, before I begin, I want to say that we're praying for those who lost their lives in the flooding in Bucks County. The idea that there's not global warming, I think, can't be denied by anybody anymore. And at any rate, we're grateful for all the first responders. Continue to look for a 2-year-old Maddie and her baby brother Conrad. With the grace of God, maybe something will come of it. I want to thank Governor Shapiro and all the Bucks County officials and their leadership during that tragic time. We provided all we could from FEMA, but there's a lot to be done. I'm here today to talk about what we're doing to invest in America, invest in Pennsylvania, invest in our clean energy future, and to talk about the progress we made building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. You know, I came to office determined to strengthen the middle class. I often say, and I mean it sincerely, you know, Wall Street, good folks down there, but they didn't build the middle class. They didn't build America. The middle class was built by the middle class. And the unions built the middle class and to change the economic direction of this country. Because I got tired of trickle-down economics. I've never been a big fan. If the wealthy do very well, I'm a capitalist. I like the wealthy to be able to let people be wealthy. But if the mere fact they do well doesn't mean everybody else does well. I watched my dad growing up. There's not a whole lot of benefit trickle down on his kitchen table as a consequence of trickle-down economics to what everyone from Financial Times and Wall Street Journal has become my different philosophy. I don't think they started off trying to be complimentary, but they started calling them Bidenomics. And our plans work in Bidenomics. We're here. Here's what it looks like. We're 13 million new jobs built across the country, nearly 500,000 of them here in Pennsylvania, just in the last 2.5 years. 800,000 manufacturing jobs, 28,000 here in Pennsylvania alone in the last 2.5 years. That's more jobs in 2 years than any president has created in a 4-year term. Unemployment is below 4%, the longest stretch of unemployment below 4% in the last 50 years. We're beginning to come back, folks. Because we're giving workers a chance. Unemployment's down. But to the surprise of a lot of economists, so is inflation. Remember the story? In order for inflation to come down, you got to cut wages for hard-working folks. You got to have unemployment up in order for inflation to come down. Well, guess what? I never bought that. I don't think the problem in America is too many people are working or the people are making too much money. Instead, we focused on getting Americans into the workforce by fixing a broken supply chain, lowering the cost of product from everything from healthcare to the products we purchase. The fact is, companies made record high profits during the pandemic. And by the way, I'm not opposed to companies. I come from the corporate capital of the world. More corporations incorporated in Delaware than every other state in the union. But everybody should pay their fair share. Everybody should pay their fair share. Now they're coming down, and so is inflation. They need to keep bringing it down, the markups and the margins of the profits. It's one thing to make a profit, it's another thing to be excessive. You know, this is one of the most important ways to continue to make progress on inflation. We have to do more. Inflation has slowed every single month in the last 12, on a yearly basis for the last 12 months. How many times you read that a recession's coming? Even Wall Street today said, no, they don't see a recession coming now. It's the lowest point in inflation, the lowest point in over 2 years. The U.S. has the lowest inflation rate of any major economy in the world, the so-called G7. It's less than 2/3 of what it was a year ago. Down from 9% to 3%, and going to go down lower. At the same time, pay for low-wage workers has gone up at a faster pace than over 2 decades. Wages are growing faster than inflation. That means a lot of working folks are beginning to be able to have a little bit of breathing room. According to the surveys, job satisfaction in America is at a 36-year high. We got more work to do. But people are coming off the sidelines to work. The share of working-age Americans in the workforce is as high as it's been in 20 years, including during every single day under my predecessor. And folks, it's not an accident. It's my economic plan in action. It's Bidenomics. Since I took office, we've attracted over $500 billion in private investment in American manufacturing and clean energy. That's what's been attracted to engage in these issues. Instead of exporting jobs, it used to be find the cheapest market in the world, send the job overseas and bring the product back. Not on my watch. Well, here we're doing, we're creating jobs in America and we're exporting American products. With the leadership of your Democratic members of Congress, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, although a few Republicans did support it. The largest investment to combat climate ever anywhere in the world. Over $368 billion. We know the urgency. I don't hear many naysayers on climate deny the floods, the heat waves, the wildfire smoke impacting so many Americans. Just this week alone, it's just spontaneous. But we also have solutions. A lot of my friends in organized labor know when I think climate, I think jobs. I think union jobs, not a joke. Not a joke. This law is creating millions of good-paying clean energy manufacturing jobs, including offshore wind. When I took office, I set a goal of producing 30 gigawatts of offshore energy wind by 2030. 30 gigawatts is enough to power 10 million homes. It'll help put us on a path to 100% clean energy by 2035. By 2035, all of the electricity you turn in is all going to be clean energy. It's not hypothetical. Construction is already underway in 2 major projects off the East Coast. And just within the last month, the Department of Interior advanced permitting on 2 more wind projects on the East Coast. And here in the Philly shipyard, Great Lakes Dredge and Dock is also stepping up to help meet the clean energy goals. Here today, workers in 9 different unions will start building a vessel called the Acadia. It's going to place heavy rocks at the base of the offshore wind projects to stabilize them when they put these down. And it's going to protect it against erosion. Be the first vessel of its kind that's made in America, American-owned, American-operated. And the rocks will come from American quarries. And it'll be loaded at American ports. Steel for vessels being made by the United States steelworkers in Indiana. The engine will be made in the United States electrical, radio, and machine workers in Pittsburgh. The crew is going to be American mariners from Seafarers International Union. The turbines themselves will be as tall as the buildings in Center City, Philadelphia. That's how big they are. And the blades, 110 yards long. I went to see them being made in Colorado. It's breathtaking. And I might add, notwithstanding what the other guy said, windmills do not cause cancer. Look, some folks may not know there was a law in 1920 called the Jones Act that was passed. It says ships traveling between U.S. ports have to be American-built, American-owned, and have American crews. But there's some content to rely on ships built overseas without American crews to operate them. Again, not on my watch. We're strengthening American shipbuilding, supporting good union jobs, and bringing offshore wind supply chains back home. Before the pandemic, supply chain wasn't a phrase that most Americans ever thought about. But today, after delays in parts and products, everybody knows what a supply chain means and why they matter. Our Investing in America agenda is bringing our clean energy supply chains home. Since I took office, we've seen more than $16 billion in new offshore wind investments, including 18 offshore wind vessels, 12 manufacturing facilities, and 13 ports. Today, we announced the first ever offshore wind sale in the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to the Gulf. I think I'm kidding. Ain't seen nothing yet. Across the Delaware River in Paulsboro, New Jersey, workers are welding the steel foundation for another large-scale wind project. That's going to create more than 3,000 good-paying jobs. The project off the coast of New York will use a vessel built in the shipyards of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida, rely on electrical substations, engineered in Kansas and made in Texas. The Inflation Reduction Act offers tax credits for projects using American-made iron, steel, manufactured projects, so our clean energy future will be made in America. I mean it. And all this investment, you know it better than any group of people I could be talking to, all this investment means good paying jobs here at home, here at home. We're making sure these new jobs come free and fair, and the ability to join a union if you're not already in a union. I made a commitment that I'd be the most pro-union president in American history. I'm keeping that promise. Let me explain why. I met with the Business Roundtable, the leading businessmen in the nation. And they asked me why. I said, because it's good for you. I tell business all the time, union workers are the best in the world. You don't just say, by the way, I want to be an electrician. Here's my license. The young woman you just heard, she's not an electrician, but guess what? 4 to 5 years of apprenticeship. It's like going back to school. It's like going to college for 4 years. You do the job right, they do it on time, and long term it costs less than non-union labor. And here at the Philly shipyard, over 1,000 union workers will be employed on site, like metal workers, boiler makers, electricians. In fact, this shipyard runs an apprentice program giving workers the skills to do these jobs. They can earn up to $100,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. Just a few years ago, this shipyard was down to a handful of workers. As these guys know, I've been coming here for a long, long time, since 1973, when it was a Navy shipyard. And a lot of us wondered whether it would still be here, didn't we? A lot of us wondered 15, 10, 12 years ago. Well, let me tell you, it's coming alive again. Just this week, my administration completed review of a potential wind project off the coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut. It's part of the National Project Labor Agreement with the building trades. And I want to thank the AFL-CIO President Liz Schuler for personally getting that done. Together, we're transforming the country, not just through manufacturing, but also rebuilding our infrastructure. We need to have the best infrastructure in the world if we're going to lead the world. We used to be number one. We now rank number 13 in the world. In highways, bridges, how can we be number one in the world? Economically. You can have the best economy without having the best infrastructure. So the bipartisan infrastructure law, which a number of our colleagues did vote for on both sides of the aisle, I've already announced 35,000 projects in 4,500 communities all across America, proving we can do big things. By the way, right here in Philly, we're going to build $1 billion tunnels underneath the water as you go from Amtrak station heading north. It's going to increase the speeds of trains. Be able to go through at 100 miles an hour instead of 30. And guess what? When you get to point A to point B and you can do it on rail and leave your car home, people leave their cars home. Saves money, saves the environment. There's no better example than here in Philadelphia. A tanker truck closed the key stretch of I-95 last month. You remember that. 150,000 vehicles cross that part of the highway. 150,000 every single day. With the leadership of Governor Shapiro, Casey, Fetterman, Boyle, Kenny, it opened in less than 2 weeks. Hear that? 2 weeks. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor. I mean, think about it, all kidding aside. When we were saying that on the bridge, people were looking at us like, oh God, here they go again. It's a record time, and guess what? Used materials from right here in Pennsylvania. All that crushed glass, all that base, and it was done with union work. Also announced $78 million for safety improvements along Roosevelt Boulevard here in Philly, from North Broad to the Bucks County line. Between 2012 and 2021, accident along that stretch of highway killed 119 people. And I don't know how many injured. 119 died. Nearly 1 in 3 Philadelphians lives within a mile of there. Thousands of families will benefit when we make that a hell of a lot safer. Removing every single lead pipe in America, including an estimated 20,000 lead pipe lines here in Philly, and thousands of lead pipes in school fountains all across America, including here in Philadelphia. There are risks to everyone's health, especially our children. We're making investments like this in communities all across the country, in red states, blue states, it doesn't matter. I'm president for everybody. And I said that no matter whether they voted for me or against me, I'd make sure we change this. You can see exactly where this money's going if you're interested. Go to invest.gov and find out what's happening in your community. Because we talked about, remember Infrastructure Week? Well, we have infrastructure decade. And guess what? It's committed $1.3 trillion. And guess what else? I lowered the federal deficit by $1.7 trillion in the first 2 years. You can do both. You know, the reason I'm saying this is we've operated on principles that haven't been working. My Invest in America agenda also had another transformative impact. All those members of Congress who voted against the bill suddenly realized it's pretty good, and they're bragging about it. I found it interesting. As you may have seen, apparently 40 million people watched. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the very conservative gentlelady from the state of Georgia, said Biden is doing things like Roosevelt, and it goes on the line as if in creating these jobs, and he thinks that. I thought that was, I never had an endorsement from her before. But all kidding aside, every single Republican voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. And now many are trying to repeal, you know, and it was the whole reason for the act was to repeal the clean energy provisions. That's why they voted no. It didn't stop them from claiming credit. Now the billions of dollars and thousands of jobs are coming to their states. And then there's this distinguished senator from Alabama, a former coach of a winning football team at University of Alabama, Senator Tuberville. You know, the one who's blocking the nominations of America's finest military leaders, jeopardizing our national security over domestic social issues. Well, he's also strongly opposed to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And now I listen to him on television. He voted against it, and here's what he says now. Great to see Alabama receive critical funds to boost ongoing broadband efforts. He thought it was a bad idea to invest in that. But now it's coming to Alabama, and hot damn boys, good thing. Look, I'm glad the senator's coming around on the infrastructure law, but I'm not going to let up until he comes around in the critical military nominations as well. Let me close with this. I'm not here to declare victory. We got a long way to go in the economy. But I'm here to say we have more work to do. We have a plan that's turning things around pretty quickly. Bidenomics is just another way of saying restore the American dream. 40 years of trickle-down economic and Democrat and Republican administrations limited the dream to those at the top. But I believe every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job no matter where they live, in the heartland, in a small town, in big cities, to raise their kids on a good paycheck, keep roofs over their head where they grew up, be able to stay there. My dad used to have an expression, and I swear to God this was an expression, as kids growing up. This is how he'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. And he meant it. He never got to go to college, but he meant it. He worked like hell. Jobs are about dignity. That's the American dream. That's Bidenomics, and rooted in what always worked best for this country. Investing in America. Investing in Americans. Because when you invest in our people, you strengthen the middle class. We see stronger economic growth that benefits everybody. The rich still do very well, and they should be able to do well. When I-95 shut down last month, nobody thought we'd have the back open in less than 2 weeks. But with American ingenuity, American workers, we proved everybody wrong. I don't know about you, but it filled me with pride about what we can do when we work together. We work together on that project. The same will be true here in Philly Shipyard with the clean energy future we're building all across America. It will be transformational. And for thousands of families who rely on good jobs for these projects create. It means restoring a sense of pride, a sense of hope, a sense of dignity that got lost somewhere along the way. For the longest time, we've been told to give up on manufacturing in America. How many times have you heard, read the paper the last 25 years, we can never lead the world of manufacturing again? Well, we are and we will. We'll never believe that. I've never believed it, and I don't think most of you did. This nation used to lead the world of manufacturing. We're going to do it again. I know the people of this country, and I can say honestly, I have never been more optimistic about America's future than I am this very day. I swear to God. I've long said to other world leaders, and I know almost every one of them personally, met them, it's never been a good bet to bet against America. It's never, never, never. You just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America, and there's nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. This is a new day. We're more work to do. We're going to get it done. Thank you. Kathy, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to the governor and the congressional delegation, the mayors, thank you, thank you, thank you. Governor Janet Mills, you're doing a great job for the people of Maine. And my good friend and great partner and a tireless fighter for good jobs, Senator Angus King, including right here in Auburn manufacturing. Representative Sherelle Pingree, champion of farmers and workers, the environment, and a great friend. And Representative Jared Golden, whose greatest claim to fame is a beautiful wife and little daughter I just met. Independent voice of the people of Maine, you serve the district just like you served your country as a Marine with integrity, honor, and fearlessness. Thank you. And by the way, he also fought hard for delivering funding on several airports in his district. I wonder how he got that money. You're doing a great job, pal. And thanks to the state legislators and local officials here today. And I know you've been hit hard by flooding, and our FEMA administrator, Griswold, has been working closely with you on terms of the ground teams that we have to get what you need. And we're not going away until everything's back, to build back better, not just build back to where it was, but better, because the environment's changed an awful lot. I'm here to talk to you about what we're doing to bring manufacturing back to America, about our progress in building an economy from the middle out, the bottom up, not the top down. Yesterday, we learned the economy grew faster than expected last quarter. And this morning, we saw data showing that last month, the annual rate of inflation continued to decline. So inflation is now at its lowest point in 2 years. And wages are up after being adjusted for inflation. When I came to office, I was determined to end the trickle-down economy. Excuse me, this little stand is out. Well, I'll make sure I don't trip over it. Maybe I stand on, make myself 3 inches taller. I came to office determined to move from a trickle-down economics that everyone from the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and it's called Bidenomics, with a plan that's working, building from the bottom up, the middle out. Folks, you know, all the trickle-down stuff, when the wealthy do very well, we all do well. Well, my dad was an honorable man. My dad worked like the devil, a real gentleman. But not a whole lot ever trickled down on our kitchen table. If you're middle-class folks, I didn't get much. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, it's leading to a boom in manufacturing, what we're doing. We've created over 13 million new jobs, more than before the pandemic. Nearly 28,700 here in Maine. Eight 800,000 new manufacturing jobs nationwide. We've attracted almost $500 billion in outside private investment to grow the economy because they know it's available now. That's more jobs in 2 years than are created by any president in a 4-year term. Unemployment in America has been below 4% for the longest stretch in over 50 years. And it's not just that we've recovered all the jobs we lost during the pandemic. It's that we now have more jobs than we did before the pandemic. Because unemployment has been so low for so long, workers have been left behind for decades aren't just finding jobs. more jobs. They're finding better jobs with higher pay. And no wonder job satisfaction, according to all the measures, is at a 36-year high. A share of working-age Americans in the workforce is as high as it's been in 20 years, including during every single day my predecessor was president. Remember we were going to have that infrastructure week? Anyway, long story. People are coming off the sidelines. Unemployment is down, but so is inflation. Remember, the experts told me and told it all that to get inflation under control, and I love this as a middle-class guy, we had to lower wages and had to have higher unemployment. Only way to get inflation down. Well, maybe if we get the excess profits of corporate America down, we lower it. But I've never thought the problem was too many people or the working people were making too much money. We now know a big part of that reason for inflation was the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, broken supply chains, and excess profits. All hitting pocketbooks hard while padding corporate profits. By the way, I'm not against corporations. I come from the corporate capital of the world, Delaware. Well, seriously, more corporations incorporated in my state than every other state in the union combined. But they should pay their fair share. When the pandemic hit, all of a sudden we could get those little computer chips about the size of the tip of my little finger. Well, guess what? You need about 300 of them to build an automobile. Guess what? And it'll go on and on and on. We attracted over $300 billion in people coming to America to build those factories now, here in America. I decided we're never going to be in a position we're not the beginning of the supply chain. A phrase I don't think any of us really heard until 3 years ago. So we went to work, getting our economy back on track, fixing those supply chains. We made a lot of progress. Now, one reason we have inflation fall by 2/3 without losing jobs is that we're seeing corporate profits start to fall as well. We have more to do, but I like what I said. Inflation is now at the lowest point it's been in over 2 years. In fact, we have the lowest rate of inflation among the world's major economies. Every major economy in the world, our inflation rate is lower. We're growing faster. We're economically more advanced than every other major country in the world. It's down from 9% to 3%, and it's going to continue to go down. While there's more work ahead, earlier this week, the Washington Post suggested Republicans may have to find something else to criticize me for. Now that inflation is coming down. Maybe they'll decide to impeach me because it's coming down. I don't know. I love that one. Oh, anyway, it's another story. At the same time, pay for low-wage workers has grown at the fastest pace in over 2 decades, and wages are growing faster than inflation. That means an awful lot to working people where I come from. They have more money in their pockets than they did before. My dad used to say, at the end of the month, the question is, you just have a little, after you pay all your bills, you have just a little breathing room, a little left over. Folks, that's Bidenomics. It's about growing the economy and strengthening the middle class, making things in America again. Under trickle-down economics, it didn't matter where companies made things as long as it helped their bottom line. Even if that meant jobs and supply chains moved overseas, what did most of these guys do? They decided to send the jobs overseas where the labor was cheaper and bring the product made back to the United States more expensive. Entire towns and communities got hollowed out, not just here in Maine, but all across America. This is not just for Maine, this is all of America. Small towns and medium-sized towns all across America. Factories got shut down. All over the country, parents saying to their children, honey, I'm sorry, I lost my job. We can't live here anymore. You saw it here in Maine. Let me remind you of a few examples. Auburn and Lewistown, right next door, used to be home for some of the country's largest textile mills. Bates Manufacturing was the largest employer in Maine, with thousands of employees supplying the country with high-quality cloth and quilts. Bates Manufacturing survived the Civil War, the Great Depression, and 2 world wars. But in the 1990s, American textile production moved overseas. Bates closed shop, and by the way, my state used to be a gigantic producer of textile, the DuPont Company. Same thing happened with Maine's iconic paper industry. The same thing happened. The industry lost 8,000 jobs over the past 2 decades as paper mills shut their doors. Take the Verso mill, Bucksport, founded in 1829, provided generations of good jobs and up to 47% of the town's tax revenue. A decade ago, it closed, devastating the town, like so many thousands of towns all across America. Between 1990 and 2010, Maine lost nearly 45,000 manufacturing jobs. And like we saw across the country, once thriving cities and towns became shadows of what they used to be. When these towns were hollowed out, something else was lost as well. And I come from Northeast Pennsylvania and know about shutting down towns. Pride. People lost their pride. Folks, this is what trickle-down economics looks like. But now we're turning things around. Since I took office, we've attracted over $500 billion in private investment in manufacturing in America. Industries of the future. We're seeing a factory boom. Spending on construction and manufacturing plants nearly doubled in the last 2 years, after growing only 2% under my predecessor in his 4-year term. The last quarter, factory construction contributed to more to the gross domestic product than it did any time in the last 40 years. Instead of exporting American jobs, we're creating American jobs and exporting American products again. That's how we make money. Like here at Auburn Manufacturing, you heard Kathy talk about starting this company 40 years ago, making advanced textiles that are fire and heat resistant. They weathered decades of economic storms. Now, with the help of the American Rescue Plan, they're having their biggest export year ever. The company's growing, and their products are made in America. Made in America. Not just here, but here we're seeing a resurgence in Maine's paper industry as well. Under the previous administration, a mill in Westbrook owned by Sappi North America laid off 75 workers. Under my administration, they got $1 million grant from the American Rescue Plan. They used it to invest in technology to improve pulp yields. Now they're expanding their business, creating hundreds of good-paying jobs. The Bucksport, the old Verso site, is now home of an aqua farming company that raises sustainable salmon. The town is beginning to boom again. And that's just the beginning. We're focused on growing the rural economy in Maine as well and all across the country. For example, under my administration, Maine has received millions of dollars to strengthen and expand access to small and mid-sized meat and poultry processing. Up to now, you had to go hundreds of miles, and you only had a few processors, and they gave you what they thought was necessary, not what your product was worth. Having these facilities close by means farmers have a better shot getting a fair price for their product. When those farmers do well, when the wealth they generate stays in Maine, when their children can stay in Maine, continue to farm, it builds a stronger rural economy. Building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out means small and mid-sized farmers, foresters, fishermen have a chance to succeed right here where they're from and don't want to leave. That's why we're providing funding to encourage companies to use resources harvested in Maine for new and innovative products. We're creating new markets for those products, like mass timber for use in tall buildings, or plant-based packaging materials, or sustainable aviation fuels. That's where it's going to come from, by the way. Mark my words, the next 20 years, farmers are going to provide 95% of all the sustainable airline fuel. From product, we're helping fund renovations at the library at Bar Harbor or Portland Museum of Art using locally sourced mass timber. We have a grant to a company called tan bark, and sako to replace plastic packaging with packaging using wood fiber. Your kids turn on. How many of your kids come to you and say, Mommy, I didn't realize all that plastic was killing all those things in the ocean, those ads you see. Well, because of what's going to happen here, it's not going to happen. Bio-based products are the future of Maine, and Maine is leading the way. Just last week, the National Climate Advisor was in Madison for the opening of Timber HP, a brand new company that's turned shuttered paper mill into America's first wood fiber insulation factory produced with 100% clean energy, helping families save on energy bills and creating 140 new jobs. And I want to congratulate Governor Mills, who just yesterday signed legislation making Maine a leader in offshore wind industry. It's a big deal. It is a big, big deal. Committing, and the federal government's doing the same, committing to 3 gigawatts of offshore wind by 2040, and which will create good-paying union jobs. I remember the Business Roundtable, the big businessmen, they said, why are you known as the most pro-labor senator in the history of America? Simple reason. Makes your products better and ultimately cheaper. You know, everybody thinks to become, for example, an electrician. You show up and say, I want to be an electrician. You got 5 years. 5 years you got to work before you can get a full salary and have the right to go out there as an electrician. It's like going back to college. 5 years. We're the best in the world. This kind of resurgence is part of my plan to invest in America, so our future, again, is made in America. Most people don't know there's been a law in the books since 1933, which means it's totally consistent with all trade laws that exist in the world. And that law says that when the federal government spends your tax dollars, it must be spent on American workers and products made in America. So, for example, when the Congress comes along and says we want to build new decks for aircraft carriers, for example, over the last so many years, I get $60 billion they vote to do things federally. Well, guess what? They ain't doing any of it unless they build it in America by American workers. Because for the last 50 years, the vast majority of Democrats and Republicans did not insist on that. That's what I mean by made in America. Well, guess what? I'm insisting on it. That's why it's here. And by the way, it's good for everybody. It's not just good for labor, it's good for everybody. And today I'm going to sign an executive order called Invent It Here and Make It Here. It's here. This is how it works. Federal agencies research and fund development to encourage innovation. This executive order dictates that those agencies have to prioritize domestic manufacturing when it comes time to bring those inventions to market. They can't go abroad. They have to look here. Who can do it here? That's the law. And we're just beginning to enforce it. Folks, we're not just making things in America. We're also buying America. I announced new standards to require construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects to be made in America. Lumber, glass, drywall, fiber optic cables, and more. Every federal infrastructure project will be built by American workers, using American products, creating American jobs. Folks know these international agencies rate all governments about their capacities. We used to be rated to have the #1 best infrastructure in the world. Now we're number 13. China Used to be beyond 13, and now they're number 2 or 3. What's going on here? How can you have the best economy in the world and the 13th ranked infrastructure law? Through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Some of my Republicans crossed over and supported this. We've already announced over 37,000 projects in 4,500 communities. Remember we used to have Infrastructure Week in the last guy's administration? Now we got Infrastructure Decade. Because guess what? Guess what? It's $1.3 trillion invested in America over the next 10 years. 1.5 billion invested right here in Maine so far. For example, we're cleaning up legacy pollution, Callahan Mine and the Superfund site in Brooksville. Maine is receiving $164 million to replace lead service lines and improve drinking water and address contaminants like PFAS. We're removing every single lead pipe in America. They're a risk to everyone's health, especially to our children with 400,000 school fountains have that lead in it. Right now, over 42,000 homes and small businesses across Maine don't have access to high-speed internet. We're investing $500 million in Maine to connect every single corner of the state, especially rural communities, to internet, affordable internet. And we're making it affordable, saving nearly 100,000 families $30 a month for their internet bills. We're making investments like this all across the country. You can see exactly where to go if you go to online to go to invest.com. Invest.com. Punch in wherever neighborhood you want to find out about. You'll see what we're doing. These investments are going to create thousands of jobs across the country. We're making sure workers have the skills they need to do these jobs. In Maine, the AFL-CIO, with funding from the American Rescue Plan, just graduated its first cohort of its Union Construction Academy to bring unprecedented workers like women and people of color into the trades. The IBEW also with funding from the American Rescue Plan, runs a pre-apprenticeship program for high school students. And there's a training center in Newport. Folks, this matters. My investing in the American agenda also has another transformative impact. Every single Republican in the Congress voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. That's the one that had a total of $659 billion for infrastructure, for the environment over the next several years. You see, they don't think we have an environmental crisis. All this stuff happening is just temporary. They don't wonder about it anymore. You know, when the ocean off the state of Delaware, or off of Florida, is 102 degrees, something's going on. The vast majority of them voted against the infrastructure law as well. But that hasn't stopped them from claiming credit for where now billions of dollars and thousands of jobs are coming to their states. Well, like I said, in the State of the Union, I'll see them at the groundbreaking. Folks, the distinguished senator from Alabama put out a release saying, Alabama is so low, I forget the exact number, is going to get $1,600,000,000 for such and such. He voted against it. He voted against it. I could go on, but I won't. But I made a commitment when I ran that I'd be present for everybody, whether they voted for me or against me. A majority of all this money is going into red states because they've been so badly hurt, a majority of it. I'm not picking winners and losers based on who they voted for. I'm picking winners and losers based on the need they have in their communities. Folks, let me close with this. I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. We have more work to do. We have a plan for turning things around. Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream. 40 years of trickle-down economic limited that dream to the very top. But I believe every American willing to work should be able to get a job, no matter where they live in the heartland, small towns, the Northeast, big cities, to raise their kids in a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. My dad used to have a saying. My dad was a well-read man, and his greatest regret was he never got to go to college, but a really decent, honorable man. And he used to, and I give my word, this is what he'd say, and all my siblings remember and my friends. He'd say, Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. That's what it's all about. That's what it's about. That's the American dream. If you're willing to work hard, you ought to be able to make it. Shouldn't be limited to just a few people. It's rooted in what's always worked best in this country. Investing in America. Investing in Americans. Because when we invest in our people, when we strengthen the middle class, we see stronger economic growth and everybody benefits. You know, we're making significant progress, and I want you to know we've done all this without raising taxes. And guess what? I commit that we'll never raise federal taxes on anybody making less than $400,000, period. Unlike and here's some of my friends on the other side, the MAGA Republicans, saying, big spend Biden's raising the deficit. Guess what? In the 4 years that the last guy was president, he raised the national debt by almost 40%. You know that $2 trillion tax cut? Raise your hand if you got any of it. $2 trillion, not a penny paid for it. But guess what? In 2 years, I've cut the national debt by $1.7 trillion while doing all of this. While doing all this. $1.7 trillion. Because when ordinary people are able to make a living, they buy things, they go out and do things, they're able to live. And it raises funding. It doesn't cut it. It doesn't cut the idea that we're going to have a bigger debt. For the longest time, I've been told to give up on American manufacturing. And some of you have been involved in American manufacturing. How many times have you been told? Well, we used to be the largest manufacturer in the world, but not anymore. We can't compete. Hell, we can't compete. There's nobody in the world we can't beat, let alone compete. I've never believed it, and we have the tools to change it. America used to lead the world in manufacturing, and we're doing it again. Folks, I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future. Now, I know it looks like I've only been around a couple days, but I've been around a long time. I've said that, and all my colleagues, and I think my former colleague in the Senate used to hear me say it, it's never, ever been a good bet to bet against the American people. Never, never, never. And it's a real bad bet to bet against us now. So, folks, I really mean this. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. We are the United States of America. And there's never been a single thing we've set our mind to in war or peace, when we've done it together, we haven't accomplished. Not one thing. That's who we are. Let's not forget that. There's nothing beyond our capacity if we work together like you're doing here in Maine. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you very much. Please have a seat if you have one. I said that once earlier in my presidency, and there were no chairs. I couldn't see. Press for Biden doesn't even know whether people can stand or sit. Anyway, it's great to be here. Thank you, Valentino, for that introduction. And what you said about the union, you know, I've said it many times. The middle class built America, but unions built the middle class, and that's a fact. Governor Evers, Mayor Johnson, County Executive Crowley, thank you all for your warm welcome. And Tammy Baldwin, you're the best, kid. You're the absolute best. If I had another 10 of you, we could rule the world. You'd really, thank you for all you do, Tammy. Appreciate it very much. And you know, no one does more to create good jobs in this state and make sure tomorrow's products are made in America. Now, a very quiet, laid-back Congresswoman who, thank God, is on my side. Thank God. Gwen Moore, you should never stop fighting for the people of Wisconsin. I love you, Gwen. You're the best. And you got a mayor and a county executive. I used to work for the county. I used to be a county councilman when I was 26 years old. And I tell you what, I ran for the Senate because it's too damn hard being on the county council. Everybody comes up to you and goes, yeah, county council, yeah, you wonder what we do, huh? Well, the truth of the matter is you do a hell of a lot, and your mayor's doing a hell of a job as well. Look, folks, I apologize because I try very hard to keep my speeches between 15 and 18 minutes. But I got to talk a little bit about Hawaii. I've been on the phone with the governor coming up here and the senators. And let me address that devastating wildfires, some of which are still burning in Hawaii. They've claimed the lives of 99 people so far, and they haven't cleaned things up yet. The deadliest wildfire in more than 100 years. A whole city destroyed. Generations of native Hawaiian history turned into ruin. I've spoken to Governor Josh Green multiple times and reassured him the state will have everything it needs from the federal government. I immediately approved the governor's request for expedited major disaster declaration. That's a fancy word of saying whatever you need, you're going to get. And that will get aid into the hands of people who desperately need it, who have lost their loved ones, who have lost their homes, their livelihoods, who have been damaged and destroyed. And think about this. All that area they got to plow up. They can't do it now because they don't know how many bodies are there. They don't know what's left. Imagine being a mom or dad, wondering where your child is. Imagine being a husband or wife, a mother or father. It's really tough stuff. Almost 500 federal personnel have been deployed to Maui to help communities and survivors get back on their feet. FEMA, search and rescue teams are sifting through the ashes in that 5-mile area that you've seen on television that's been burned. It's painstaking work. It takes time. And it's nerve-wracking. Most of the debris can't be removed until it's done. My wife Jill and I are going to travel to Hawaii as soon as we can. That's what I've been talking to the governor about. I don't want to get in the way. I've been to too many disaster areas, but I want to go and make sure we got everything they need. I want to be sure we don't disrupt the ongoing recovery efforts. FEMA Administrator Griswold, who's the best we ever had, I think, was on the ground this weekend. I just talked to her. She's back in the States. I have directed her to streamline the process as quickly as possible to help register survivors for immediate federal assistance without delay. To date, FEMA has approved 50,000 meals, 75,000 liters of water, 500 beds, 10,000 blankets, and as well as other shelter supplies for survivors displaced from their homes. FEMA also authorized one-time payments of $700 per household to folks who have been displaced so they can do the immediate things of just taking care of medications and prescriptions that they so badly need. We're working with the state to make sure survivors that have lost their homes have a place to call home until we can rebuild. We're also surging federal personnel to the state to help the brave firefighters and first responders, many of whom lost their own homes, their properties, while they're out busting their neck to save other people. How many have been so impacted themselves, but they're still working around the clock to put the fires out, evacuate survivors, to safety and find the missing. I've ordered all available federal assets on the island to assist local crews, including the U.S. Coast Guard, the Navy 3rd Fleet, and the U.S. Army. In the immediate aftermath, the Coast Guard and Navy supported maritime searches and rescue operations. The Army helicopters help fire suppression and efforts on the Big Island, because there's still some burning on the Big Island, not the one where you see on television all the time. FEMA has deployed more than 140 urban search and rescue personnel as well. And there's so many organizations to thank, like the American Red Cross, helping survivors, missing loved ones. Cell phone providers, making sure first responders can make and respond to emergency calls. Commercial airlines that have evacuated tens of thousands of people from the island. The list goes on. And the Small Business Administration has dozens of staff on the island and has begun making low-interest federal disaster loans available to Hawaii businesses, homeowners and renters, and nonprofits to help them begin to rebuild, just to get by for the immediate near term. And we're going to continue to coordinate relentlessly with the people on the ground to make sure the critical work continues. In the meantime, you always hear this phrase, and I've done it so many disasters in my career, it's almost hollow. Our prayers, our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Hawaii, but not just our prayers. Every asset they need, we'll be there for them. And we'll be there in Maui as long as it takes. As long as it takes, and I mean that sincerely. We're going to have more to report on this. But today, I come to Milwaukee to talk about what we're doing to bring manufacturing back home. It's about our progress, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. You know, that trickle-down economics, not a whole lot landing on my dad's kitchen table. But when the middle works and the bottom has a shout up, the wealthy do very well. I'm a capitalist. If you can make $1 billion, go make it. I mean it. Just pay a little more taxes than you're paying right now. 8% doesn't quite get it. But look, I came to office determined to move away from the trickle-down economics and to focus on the middle class. Because I said, when the middle class does well, everybody does well. Everybody does well. The Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal started calling my plan not initially as a compliment to Bidenomics. But guess what, folks? They're talking about it differently now. It's working. It's working. I'm serious. Because we're investing in America. According to Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, my plan is leading to a boom. They call it a boom in manufacturing. And manufacturing investment, as you're seeing right here in this factory. Over 13.4 million new jobs. 150,000 new jobs in the state of Wisconsin. Nearly 800,000 new manufacturing jobs nationwide. More than 20,000 manufacturing jobs in Wisconsin. From Green Bay to Verona to Pleasant Prairie. We've added more jobs in 2 years than any president has in American history in a 4-year term. More in 2 than any's done in 4. And unemployment has been below 4% for the longest stretch in over 50 years. 50 years. Wisconsin's unemployment rate is just 2.5%. That's lower than it was every single month. The prior administration. We've recovered all the jobs lost during the pandemic. We've added millions more. People are coming off the sidelines, getting back into the workplace. Remember a while there they were saying, well, Biden just allowed people not to work and get paid. Guess what? The higher percentage of American workers working today than ever before. And while unemployment is down, in case you haven't noticed, inflation is down too and it's going lower. Remember what the experts said, to get inflation under control, you needed lower wages and higher unemployment. Not a joke. Those of you economists know that's the economic mantra. To get inflation under control, fewer jobs, more unemployment, that's number one. And making sure that you don't have to deal with, that's what they say caused inflation. But I never thought the problem was too many people working or working people making too much money. And And one reason we've seen inflation fall by 2/3 without losing jobs is that we're seeing corporate profits come back down to earth. You know, we have more to do with inflation now. It's just about 3% now. It's predicted to go lower than that. We're near the lowest point in over 2 years. And at the same time, we pay for low-wage workers has grown at the fastest rate in 2 decades. Wages are growing faster than inflation. Folks, that's Bidenomics. It's about growing an economy by strengthening the middle class. And making things in America again. You know, it's in stark contrast to the conservative Republican view, the so-called MAGA view, which is focused on corporate profits. They say we should find, and the rationale up to now has been, let's find the cheapest place in the world to make our product. Let's shut down the operation in America and send it overseas. And then send the refined product back to America and sell it here. That's the philosophy. But you know who believes that? Your significant Senator, Ron Johnson. He believes outsourcing manufacturing jobs is a great thing. He's on record as saying he doesn't agree with American work. This is what he said. American workers should manufacture, he doesn't think they should manufacture products that require a lot of labor. Here's what he said, quote, "Let the billions of people around the world do that," end of quote. You wonder why the hell we got ourselves in trouble. Well, we've been letting them do that for too damn long. It's time to build American products in America. You can see how Ron Johnson's rationale and Omega rationale have worked out. Between the year 2000 and January 2021, Wisconsin alone lost more than 136,000 manufacturing jobs alone. I'd like to see Senator Johnson talk to those 136,000 people and tell them it doesn't matter whether you manufacture things at home or overseas. It sure as hell does, man. Not only for those 136,000 people who lost their jobs, but for their families and their communities and the economic growth it generated here at home. Let's take a look at how the Johnson philosophy played out in real time in Wisconsin. Like in Kenosha, about 40 miles from here. There used to be a lot of people assembling automobiles there, making a direct living for their families, generating economic growth for Kenosha until American Motors plant closed in '88. Or take a look at Milwaukee, known as the manufacturing powerhouse for so long. That's when I got to the Senate. I've been around about 200 years. When I got to the Senate in 1973, Milwaukee was a manufacturing powerhouse. That's how it was referred to. Not a joke. Not a joke. I don't have to tell anyone in this audience how hard people here work. And all you've done to keep this city strong. Still, by early 2000, Milwaukee had lost around 2 out of 3 factory jobs. 80,000 jobs were gone. 80,000. When those jobs were lost, something else was lost as well. Pride, a sense of dignity. My dad, and I swear to God, this was his expression, used to have an expression. My dad was a high school educated guy who was well read and worked like hell. He didn't have a chance to go to college. He used to say, "Joey," and this is the God's truth, "Joey, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. That's what a job is about. That's what a job is about." And when the breadwinner in the family loses their job, they lose their pride and the sense of dignity that goes with that. People like Ron believe that it's a good thing. The corporate American bottom line is if that's all you need to look at, it's good for America. Well, that's not my bottom line. From the day I took office, I was determined to turn around with what now they call them Bidenomics. It's one of the reasons why I fought so hard to write and get past the CHIPS and Science Act. We used to invest more in science and research than any country in the world. almost 2% of our gross domestic product. Now it's about 0.7% we invest. We're the best engineers in the world. We're the best scientists in the world. We're the best researchers in the world. What the hell are we doing? Well, guess what? That Chips and Science Act has generated $231 billion in the last 18 months in private investments making semiconductors here in America. By the way, we, the United States, invented those semiconductors. We invented them when we went to the moon. They're those small computer chips the size of the tip of your finger, affecting nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones, automobiles, to the most sophisticated weapon systems in the world. Let me give you one concrete example. I remember the chairman of the largest chip maker in the world in South Korea. It's called SK, when I was in South Korea. They're investing now $22 billion in America. And I asked them why. I said, God's truth, why America? And he said, number one, think of this now, remember it. Number one, there's no safer place in the world to have my investment than the United States of America. And number two, you have the best workers in the world, and he's right. That's the truth. It's about time Ron Johnson's friend understood that. Look, folks, they think you want an IBW. I wouldn't be standing here this time without you guys. But the IBW, they think, average American, they're not being mean or anything. They think, well, being an electrician, you say, I want to be an electrician. You get a card. 4 to 5 years of apprenticeship. Hear me? Like going back to college. 4 to 5 years. You get paid, but not nearly what you get paid when you get your card. You got to talk more about what you do and what it takes to get it done. People aren't trying to be mean, they just don't know. But I'm sure in hell telling them. The bottom line is we invented chips here in America. We used to produce them here. We used to produce 40%, and now we're bringing them back home. Thankfully. We have people like Tammy Baldwin, who championed, that's the God truth, Buy American policies leading to resurgence of manufacturing in Wisconsin and across the country. You heard me say it before. Where in God's name is it written that America can't lead the world again in manufacturing? Where is that written? Folks, nowhere. You got it. Since I took office, we've attracted more than $1.5 trillion. Let me say it again. $1.5 trillion in private investment in American manufacturing and the industries of the future. Spending on construction of manufacturing plants that need to be built nearly doubled in the last 2 years. And you know, that's not just the permanent jobs. They're generating growth, economic growth. Look, construction jobs do that as well. We've added 600,000 good-paying construction jobs since I took office. When they build these plants to build these chips, guess what? They call them fabs. They're as big as football, long as football fields. That's how big they are. They're gigantic. And guess what? The people who work there, you know what the average salary is in these fabs? $116,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. What the hell are we talking about? Folks, instead of exporting American jobs, we're creating American jobs and exporting American products. And they're being built right here in Wisconsin and places where factories have been shut down. Look what you're doing here. Enga team came to Milwaukee 10 years ago, thanks to tax incentive and clean energy during the Obama-Biden administration. Then exactly 1 year ago tomorrow, I signed a significant piece of clean energy legislation combating the existential threat of climate change, the single largest investment ever anywhere in the world, without one single member of the other team voting for it. That law reauthorized those clean energy tax credits and expanded them. As a result, this company predicts that demand for the wind turbine generators, which they're making right here in this facility, will double next year. And since I took office, the private sector has announced more than $3 billion in investments, not million, billion, in investments for wind energy manufacturing in America. And by the way, it's cheaper than fossil fuels, cheaper than fossil fuels. And that's not all. Until this year, this company didn't think it made sense to make chargers for electric vehicles in the United States. But then, when I signed the bipartisan infrastructure again, which Ron Johnson and his friends didn't vote, they all voted against, that law invests $7.5 billion to build a network of thousands of electric vehicle chargers stretching across the country, including on I-94. By the way, over 500,000 of these charging stations. That's real jobs. That's real money. And by the way, my grandpa Biden, who died very young, died in the hospital I was born in 6 days before I was born. He worked for the American Oil Company. His job was to go from town to town, expanding the American Oil Company, building new gas stations. People didn't know where they wanted a couple thousand gallons of gasoline under the ground where they are. What happens when you build a gas station? You end up with something like a 7-Eleven or a donut shop or a drugstore around it. It generates economic growth. We're going to be building these facilities all across America so you can plug in and go the width of the country. That way you can travel coast to coast without worrying about running out of power. Every single one of these chargers must be installed by workers certified by the IBEW plant. Every one. That was the condition. Every one. And every single one must be made in America. Now, there's a provision in law that I thought I knew a fair amount, but I didn't realize, maybe you did, Tammy, but I didn't realize back in the 30s it passed a law that's consistent with international trade, that if the Congress passes a law to spend money and the president has to decide where to spend it, he or she has to spend it on American workers and in American products. Well, most presidents, including Democrats, didn't pay a lot of attention to that. But I did. And so now, to use a non-American product, you've got to have a real good reason to prove to me you can, in fact, get it from an American product. Look, folks, this company concluded that it was an opportunity for them as well. And now they're making fast-charging EV chargers here in America, right in Wisconsin. Their goal is to manufacture 13,000 high-speed chargers every single year. And guess what? To the chagrin of your senator, the other senator, it's going to add 100 good-paying jobs. Folks, this is happening across the state. It's a direct result of those clean energy investments I signed into law a year ago. Folks, as I've said for a long time, when I think climate, I think jobs. Not a joke. When I think climate, I think jobs. That's the future. By the way, Texas, the state of Texas, a very enlightened governor, the state of Texas has the significant highest number of wind and solar facilities, I think, of any state in the nation. And it's cheaper than fossil fuel. He wants to shut them down. Isn't that enlightened? Like the 12 solar energy products and Alon Energy is building across Wisconsin, creating more than 2,000 jobs, local construction jobs. Most of them union jobs, and in the process of serving customers in Wisconsin, saving them more than $1.6 billion in energy costs. These are facts, not fiction. And back to Kenosha, which was hit hard by American Motors when it closed. Now, Paris Solar has broken down on the state's first large-scale solar and battery storage project in Kenosha County. It's creating 300 good-paying construction jobs. 300. And just today, the company Siemens announced that because of that law I signed and the significant investment we're making in clean energy, they're going to begin manufacturing solar inverters here in Wisconsin. And by the way, American people are going to be learning, no matter how well educated, you're going to be learning a lot, because I bet most people don't know what a solar inverter is. It converts solar energy from the sun into electricity. Kind of a novel idea, isn't it? How many times do you ever think in those days when you had those real big bills in the winter and a hot day came, well, why couldn't we capture all this? Well, guess what? They're going to be doing a piece of that. Sunlight shines down and the inverter turns into electricity. And they're going to build them just outside of Kenosha. Don't tell me Americans can't innovate. Don't tell me that. Since I took office, I've seen more than $3 billion in private investment in clean energy manufacturing all across Wisconsin. That's Bidenomics. That's investing in America. Totally consistent with international law and trade agreements. And investing in America means investing in all of America. When I ran for president, I made a promise that I would leave no one behind, no part of the country to leave behind. I'm getting mad. A lot of Democrats are getting mad at me because we're investing actually more in red states than blue states right now. But they're all Americans. I made a promise. I made a promise no matter where. And folks, red states, blue states, urban, suburban, or rural, all of that will benefit from what we do. That's why I launched the Rural Partners Network to help rural communities, including here in Wisconsin and my state of Delaware, which is mostly rural, believe it or not, create jobs and economic opportunity. And my administration has invested hundreds of millions of dollars to support small and medium-sized meat and poultry processors across the Midwest, including dozens here in Wisconsin, from Lancaster to Richland Center to Soldiers Grove. This way, farmers can get the best price for their product. They don't have to deal with the only giant processor that pays them less for what they need. No, I mean it. And that wasn't my idea. That was the Secretary of Agriculture, the former governor of Iowa. But, folks, that's not all. We're also investing $230 million in Wisconsin to support agriculture that's good for the environment, like planting cover crops that replenish the soil with nutrients and absorb carbon from the air. We're helping farmers, ranchers, foresters get paid for doing the right thing. It's simple, folks. When farmers do well, when the wealth they generate stays in Wisconsin, then their children can stay in Wisconsin and find opportunity here and build a stronger rural economy. Investing in America also means rebuilding our infrastructure. The governor talked about how many bridges and roads. I mean, it's amazing. And it's not even been a year yet. It's just been about a year. You know, the last guy talked about infrastructure month. We got infrastructure decade, baby. 10 years. Don't think I'm kidding. They never had 1 month. I'm joking. I'm not joking. And by the way, a number of my Republican friends voted against this infrastructure bill, including your distinguished other senator. You know, we used to be #1 in the world in infrastructure. But over time, we slipped to the 13th best infrastructure. 13th best infrastructure in the world from #1. How can you be the best economy in the world with a second-rate infrastructure? Not a joke. How can you do that? Well, through the bipartisan infrastructure law, we've already announced 37,000 projects, 4,500 communities across America, including hundreds of projects, as the governor referenced, right here in Wisconsin. Let me give you a couple examples. We're investing $80 million to replace the interstate bridge over the Wisconsin River in Columbia County. That's a major route connecting people in Milwaukee, Madison, and Chicago. And look across town, where union workers are building North Holton Street Bridge, which is nearly 100 years old. More than 10,000 vehicles travel over it every single day across the Milwaukee River. It's dangerous, and this reconstruction is long overdue. A lot of you were with me when I was in Pittsburgh. By the way, Pittsburgh is a city of bridges, more bridges in Pittsburgh than any other city in America. I watched that bridge collapse. I got there and saw it collapse with over 200 feet off the ground going over a valley. And it collapsed. Thank God school was out during the pandemic. Imagine all the people would have died. And they knew for years they had to do something. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars to rebuild it. You know, I know everybody kids me because I'm an Amtrak guy. I like rail. Well, I've traveled over 1,280,000 miles on Amtrak. I know you think that's nuts. I do too, but the reason for that is when I got elected, I was 29 years old. I was in an office hiring staff, and I got a phone call saying my wife and daughter were dead and my 2 boys were not likely to live. Tractor trailer broadsided and killed them. And I didn't want to stay in Washington. So I said a lot of really good senators, including a couple good Republican friends, became friends. Said, just come and stay 6 months, help us organize. Hell, we had 58 Democratic senators already and a Democratic governor. I didn't know any better. But I stayed. And I started to commute every day. Because having been listed as the poorest man in Congress for 36 years, true, my wife called me one day and says, did you read the paper today? And I was up campaigning for a guy named Pat Leahy in Vermont. I said, no, honey, I didn't see the Wilmington paper. He said, headline, above the fold. Only a politician's wife would say that. Biden, poorest man in Congress. Is that true? Like I was cheating on her or something. But I was. And I couldn't afford a house in Washington, and I couldn't afford a house in Delaware. If I sold my house in Delaware, I'd lose the election. So I started to commute. It's only 300 miles a day, but it still takes me an average of 4 hours beginning to end. And so what happened was when you travel as vice president on Air Force planes, they keep a precise number of miles you travel. And I guess it was in my 7th year or 6th year as vice president, there was a headline in the New York paper saying, Biden travels almost 1,200,000 miles on Air Force planes, 1,100,000 or whatever. I'm getting on the train one day. The Secret Service are the best in the world. They don't like me traveling on the train because there are too many opportunities for people to do bad things on trains. And so I'm getting on a train to go home and see my mom, who was sick and in hospice at my home. And this guy, I won't mention his name because I would get him in trouble, but one of the senior guys in Amtrak who I rode with all the time comes up and goes, Joey, baby, grabs my cheek. Swear to God, I thought they were going to shoot him. And I said, no. I said, what's the matter, Angie? He said, I read this thing about over 1 million miles on Air Force planes. He said, hell, you know how many miles you travel on Amtrak? I said, no, Angie, I don't know. He said, we just had a retirement dinner up in Newark. He said, you travel average 117 days a year, round trip, 300 miles a day. 36 years, that's 1,285,000 miles. I don't want to hear any more about the Air Force. True story. I swear to God. I'm getting off point here, but anyway. But rail saves a lot. Electric rail saves a lot of energy in the environment. Thanks to the infrastructure law, we're providing $23 million to upgrade, modernize Mitchell International Airport, which is going to increase economic activity in Milwaukee. We're also removing every single lead pipe in Wisconsin. Every single one. These lead pipes are dangerous. Some of you may remember, I had a guest at the last State of the Union when I was speaking, and a young woman named Deanna Branch. She's a Milwaukee mom. She had her 3-year-old son, Aiden, with her, who was hospitalized twice for lead poisoning because of lead pipes in her home. Well, guess what? We're removing every single lead pipe in Wisconsin out of the ground. That's a fact. The risk to everyone's health, especially our children's. And then over 250,000 homes and small businesses across Wisconsin don't have access to high-speed, affordable internet. No parent should have to sit outside at McDonald's when schools are closed to be able to get a McDonald's internet so the kid can do their homework. Not a joke. Well, guess what? They do it, but you don't have internet at home. That's why we're investing over $1 billion in every corner of this state, especially rural communities and family farms, with affordable high-speed internet, every single home. Folks, all our high-speed internet projects must use products and construction materials made in America. Look, folks, it's really kind of basic. We just decided to invest in America again. That's what it's all about. I want you to see exactly what we're making these investments across the country. If you want to know exactly where they are, you can go on the internet, go to invest.gov, put in your location and find out what's happening. Exactly what's happened or scheduled to happen. Folks, we've done all this without raising anybody's taxes, making under $400,000 bucks. My friends talk about the big spend of Biden. Well, guess what? I made a promise. I'll never raise federal tax on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. I kept my promise. And unlike the last president, in my first 2 years in office, even with all we've done, I'm the first one to cut the federal debt by $1,700 billion. $1,700 billion cut. Because we generated the growth. Folks, every Republican voted against our clean energy investment, known as the Inflation Reduction Act. The vast majority voted against the bipartisan infrastructure law. But that didn't stop them from claiming credit for protecting the health of their constituents that are getting rid of lead pipes or putting to work and building new roads and bridges. Look, I think the vast majority of my Republican colleagues in the Senate know better. We got to stop the partisanship. We got to stop this stuff. This legislation they oppose or attack is now the greatest thing to come to their states. You know, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, you know, the very quiet lady from North Carolina, from Georgia. Well, she talked about what Biden's doing is what Roosevelt did, what Kennedy did. I thought, well, yeah. But look, folks, like I said, I made a commitment because I knew this was going to happen. I knew what would happen is the folks who voted against these things, and we barely passed them, sometimes by 1 or 2 votes, when it came to their states would claim credit. I want them to get credit. That's okay. It's okay, as long as they continue to support the things we're doing. You know, I said I represent all the American people, in red states and blue states, but that doesn't mean I can't make fun of the hypocrisy of those claiming credit. And like I said in the State of the Union, I'll see them at the groundbreakings. Look, let me close with this. I'm not here to declare victory on the economy. We're not there yet. We have more work to do. But we've always had a plan that turning things around, making America stronger and safer and more competitive. Bidenomics is just another way of saying restoring the American dream. That's what it is. Just restoring the American dream. I believe every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job, no matter where they live, in the heartland, small towns, raise their kids on a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. That's the American dream. That's Bidenomics. It's rooted in what has always worked best for this country, investing in America, investing in Americans. Because when we invest in our people, when we strengthen the middle class, we see stronger economic growth that benefits all Americans. The most important thing I want to say today is this. Thank you. Not thank you for how you voted, but thank you to the people of Wisconsin. Thank you to the American people. We've faced some pretty tough times in recent years. The pandemic took over 1 million lives. How many empty chairs are there sitting there on dining room tables these days? Our neighbors, our friends, our fellow Americans, they're still living in pain and loss and isolation caused by the pandemic. It generated the most severe economic crisis since the Great Depression. Wasn't that long ago that 20 million people in America were out of work. But today, the American people, they didn't give up. Wisconsin didn't give up. Americans didn't give up. America didn't give up. And I've said it 1,000 times. There is no quit in America. There is no quit in America. Look how far we've come. Today is not high price. We have the strongest economy in the world. And you're looking at me a little skeptical, but I promise you, check it out. The strongest economy in the world. the highest job satisfaction in 36 years. Our inflation rate has dropped to the lowest among major economic nations in the world. And if we keep it up, it's going to go lower, according to money. All I hear from my friends on the other side of the aisle is what's wrong with America. There's a lot wrong with America, like every country. They tell us America's failing, but they're wrong. Democrats, Republicans, independents, conservatives, liberals. I don't think they understand the average American. Whatever we set our mind to as a country, we've always accomplished. Name me one thing in American history where America stood together and said, we're going to solve that problem, we didn't do it. Name me one. Name me one. There's nothing beyond our capacity. America isn't failing. America is winning. And I'm proud of the historic legislation my administration passed. They're the right steps not only to get our economy moving again, but to build to the future. But the real hero in this story is all of you, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. People of Milwaukee, people of Wisconsin, the American people. Yes, my policy helped create a lot of these jobs and continue to grow, but you're the ones getting up every single day, walking out that door and doing the work. Yes, my policies have helped create some small businesses. We've created more than any time in history, but you're the ones who decided to borrow the money and take the risk in the middle of this concept. You took the risk to hire workers, fulfilling your dreams. I've long said it's never, ever, ever been a good bet to bet against America. Never, never, never. And it's not a good bet today. This is still a country that believes in honesty, decency, and integrity. The vast majority of Americans do. Our political leaders, sometimes in both parties, don't. We're still a country that believes in hard work. We're still a country that believes that each and every one of us is created equal. We're still a beacon to the world. That's because small towns and in rural America and suburbs, big cities all across the country, every ordinary person, all ordinary people, do the most extraordinary things. Let me tell you, America's best days are ahead, not behind us. Not because of me, because of you. It isn't about the past, it's about the future. It's about each of us writing the next chapter in American history. I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I've never been more optimistic about America's future, both domestic and foreign. We just have to remember who the hell we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's do it together. God love you. May God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you. Good afternoon, folks. I'm not introducing me, Mark is. I forgot Mark. I went straight to the podium. I apologize.
No problem. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Anthony Thomas, and I have the privilege of leading the Greater Baltimore Committee, the economic and civic organization for the Baltimore region. Like many post-industrial communities in America, Baltimore has faced long-standing challenges, suffered economic setbacks, and until recently, lacked the federal support to tell a brighter and more vibrant story of the community I know and love. The truth is, cities like Baltimore are brimming with possibility. They are filled with diverse, entrepreneurial minds. They are epicenters of rich histories, and they are ripe for the sort of catalytic investment that can spark local economies. They just need the right support to leverage those possibilities. Today, thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, I can return to my community and proudly say, we are a tech hub. We brought together 38 consortium partners, academic institutions, local startups, major corporations, and our regional economic organizations and electeds to position our region as a global hub for predictive technologies that improve health and well-being. Over the next decade, we envision the economic impact could be staggering. More than $4.2 billion and 52,000 jobs could be created through this innovation. We found ourselves a real partner in this endeavor. Thanks to President Biden's leadership and the support of our state and local partners, Baltimore is poised to become one of the world's top biotech and artificial intelligence hubs. And so many communities just like ours are now set to become true economic powerhouses. It is now my honor and my privilege to introduce a true champion for innovation, President Joe Biden.
Folks, Mark, thank you very much for the introduction. Look, a little over a year ago, I signed the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act. That act did two things. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. First, it's a historic investment of bringing the semiconductor industry back to America. We invented the semiconductor. The little computer chips are about the size of the tip of your little finger. They affect nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones to automobiles, refrigerators, to the most sophisticated weapon systems we have. America invented these chips, but over time we went from producing nearly 40% of the world's chips down to producing just over 10%. And as a result of the Chips and Science Act, the semiconductor companies all over the world are investing over $100 billion to bring chip production back to the United States. I've visited almost every major center, starting from South Korea on, and they want to be here, building the chips here in America. Second, the bill created what we call tech hubs as part of the bill. A tech hub is we're going to invest in critical technologies like biotechnology, critical materials, quantum computing, advanced manufacturing. So the U.S. will lead the world again in innovation across the board. These hubs all around the country will bring together private industry, higher education, state and local governments, tribes, and organized labor. Today, we're announcing that 31 tech hubs spread across the entire company will be able to compete for up to $75 million each to accelerate and scale up their work. And I want to thank Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Todd Young, and Representative Joe Morelli and Susan Wild for their work to make this happen. Representatives from many of these hubs are in the screen behind me, and in front of me that's why I was starting to look to see whether they're still there. The work they're doing is transformational. For example, a tech hub in Wisconsin, they're going to bring together research labs, medical device manufacturers, and engineers. They're going to build technology that supports personalized medicine, like tests, treatments, and therapies specifically tailored to a patient's genetic code and medical records. And I believe it's going to save a lot of lives in the long run. Ohio, the largest concentration of rubber and plastic manufacturing in North America. In the Ohio hub, businesses and universities are going to come together to develop sustainable plastic and rubber technology that can be produced with fewer emissions and is able to be recycled and is biodegradable and is non-toxic, which is going to significantly impact on the environment. These hubs are also making sure workers get the skills they need to do these jobs. For example, the leadership of Majority Leader Schumer, a hub in upstate New York is going to support a workforce training program for New York's semiconductor industry, which, by the way, has seen tens of billions of dollars in new investment because of the Chips and Science Act. This hub will have a particular focus on training people from communities historically left behind, like women, people of color, to work in the semiconductor industry. The list goes on. We're doing this from coast to coast, and in the heartland, in red states and blue states, small towns, cities of all sizes. All this is part of my strategy to invest in America and invest in Americans. It's working. We're creating good jobs in communities all across the country, including places where for decades factories have been shut down, hollowed out when jobs moved overseas to find cheaper employment. Over the past few decades, these communities lost more than jobs. They lost their sense of dignity, of opportunity, sense of pride. We're going to change all that. Tech Hubs are going to bring this work to where people live in communities all across America. The press has started to call my plan Bidenomics. Well, under Bidenomics, you don't have to leave home or your family to get a good job. For too long, science and innovation and economic opportunities that came with it were concentrated on the coast. As a country, we used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development. Now it's 0.7%. How can you lead the world when you no longer lead in research and development? My plan is changing that. Under Bidenomics, we're going to make sure America's future is made in America. You know, it's leading to a manufacturing boom, attracting over $600 billion so far in private investment in American manufacturing and our clean energy future. For too long, we looked around the world to find, corporations looked around the world to find the cheapest employment and then imported the products they made, the foreign product. Now, we're creating American jobs and exporting American products. And that's good for everybody. These tech hubs will be transformational, and they're part of a long line of transformational investments we've made since I took office. And as a result, I truly believe this country is about to take off. Because for the first time in a long time, we're investing in America. And we're investing in American people. We're investing in our future. I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future. I want to thank you, and I'm going to leave you now with Secretary Gina Raimondo, who's been the engine behind this effort. And she's going to lead the discussion with representatives from these tech hubs on the screen behind me for all of you to see. I apologize I have to go into a situation with another issue that I have to deal with. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sir, Pope Francis spoke with you yesterday. You spoke with Pope Francis by phone yesterday.
I did.
How did that conversation impact you? What did you take away from that, a conversation with Pope Francis?
Well, that's just one question. The Pope and I are on the same page. He was very, very interested in what we were doing to deal with some of the crises that we're facing, particularly in Israel this time around. And I laid out to him what the game plan was, how we thought we should be providing the kind of assistance to Israel that needed. And the Pope was across the board supportive of what we're doing. Thank you.
Should Israel hold off supporting the hostages for a ceasefire deal?
Why did you? We should have a ceasefire. It's not a ceasefire. We should have those hostages released, and then we can talk.
Has there been any progress on that front, Mr. President?
Okay, thank you, press. We're going to line up here by the door.
Hello, hello, hello. Well, folks, please take a seat if you have one. I said that some time ago, take a seat, and there weren't any seats in the room. And I said, see that Biden, he didn't even know there's no seats. At any rate, before I start today, I'd like to say a few words about the latest developments in the Gaza Strip in Israel. Today, thanks to concerted American leadership, we're in a situation where safe passage for wounded Palestinians and foreign nationals to exit Gaza has started. The American citizens are able to exit today as part of the first group of probably over 1,000. We'll see more of this process going on in the coming days. We're working nonstop to get Americans out of Gaza as soon and as safely as possible. This is the result of intense and urgent American diplomacy with our partners in the region. I personally spent a lot of time speaking with the Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel and the President Sisi of Egypt and others to make sure that we could open this access for people to get out. I want to thank our partners in the region, and particularly Qatar, who's worked so closely with us to support negotiations to facilitate the departure of these citizens. At the same time, we're continuing working to significantly step up the flow of critical humanitarian assistance into Gaza. The number of trucks entering Gaza continues to increase significantly, but we still have a long way to go. The United States is going to continue to drive humanitarian support for innocent people in Gaza who need help, and they do need help. We're going to continue to affirm that Israel has the right to responsibility to defend its citizens from terror and it needs to do so in a manner that is consistent with international and humanitarian law that prioritizes the protection of citizens. We've all seen the devastating images from Gaza. Palestinian children crying out for lost parents, parents reasoning and writing their children's names on their hands and legs to be identified if the worst happens. It's okay. Kids are allowed to do that with me. Okay? Don't worry about it, all right? I don't blame her. Is it him or her? I don't blame her. Look, the loss of every innocent life is a tragedy. We grieve for those deaths and continue to grieve for the Israeli children and mothers who were brutally slaughtered by Hamas terrorists, and also continue to hold in our hearts the hundreds of families and loved ones, including small children and elderly grandparents, including American citizens being held hostage. My administration continues to work around the clock to reunite those families. We're not going to give up, period. We're not going to give up. And I am optimistic, but then I am an optimist. Folks, now I want to thank Brad for that introduction. Brad said he wasn't sure what a good speaker was. He can speak a hell of a lot better than I can farm. And I'm glad to be accompanied by, I want to talk about my administration and its investment in rural America. But I also want to thank Governor Vilsack, former Governor Vilsack, now the Secretary of Agriculture. Look, creating opportunities for family farmers and tribal communities across the country is what we're trying to do here. And Tim, and Governor Waltz, Governor, thank you for the great work and the partnership, what you're doing here in Minnesota. And Mayor Rhonda, where's Rhonda, with the mayor? There you are, Mayor. Thank you for being here as well. I appreciate it. And thank you for the passport into the city. I don't get many passports these days. Over the past 40 years or so, we've had a practice in America, economic practice called trickle-down economics, and it hit rural America especially hard. It hollowed out Main Street, telling farmers the only path to success was to get big or get out. Tax cuts for big corporations encouraged companies to grow bigger and bigger, move jobs and production overseas for cheaper labor, and undercut local small businesses. Meat-producing companies and the retail grocery chains consolidate, leaving farmers and ranchers with few choices about where to sell their products, reducing their bargaining power. Corporations that sell seed, fertilizer, and even farm equipment use their outsized market power to change farmers and charge them and ranchers unfair prices. You know, in part because of these conditions, over the past 4 decades, we lost over 400,000 farms in America. 400,000. Over 141 million acres of farmland. And that's an area roughly equal to the size of Minnesota, North and South Dakota combined, the three. Facing higher costs and earning less, family farms have struggled to make it work, to make the math work. And the promise of keeping the farm and the family is slipping out of reach for so many across America. And when family farms go by the wayside, small businesses, hospitals, schools that support them, they suffer as well in the community. And as a result, farmers and ranchers and rural business owners, including scores of young people, have to leave home in search of good-paying jobs and a chance at the American dream. All over rural America, young people are saying to their parents, I can't live here anymore. I can't do it because I can't find a job. You gave me an education, but there's nothing for me here. I got to leave. I came to office determined to change that. And by the way, parenthetically, I come from a state that people think is all manufacturing, DuPont, all like those kinds. But it's also a $4 billion industry in agriculture in the Delmarva Peninsula. Almost all chickens and soybeans, but I watch what happened in my community. I watch what happened all across America. Now we're growing an economy from the middle out and the bottom up instead of the top down. folks, there's a practical reason for that. When the middle class does well, the poor have a way up, and the wealthy still do very well. It's everybody does better. When rural America does well, when Indian country does well, we all do well. And folks, and President calling my plan Bidenomics. Well, it's about investing in all of America, including rural America. It's about making things in rural America again. And that's exactly what the historic legislation we passed has done, creating new and better markets and new income streams so that generations of rural Americans can begin to thrive again. For example, through our clean energy initiatives contained in the Inflation Reduction Act, we're investing nearly $20 billion. $20 billion, the money's there to help farmers and ranchers tackle climate crisis through climate-smart agriculture and cover crops, nutrient management. It's not great. And storing carbon in the soil, reducing greenhouse gas emissions while improving overall health of the soil and the water. And instead of doing what they have to do now, depending on one income stream being at the mercy of the commodity markets and the big corporations, under our plan, farmers can diversify and earn additional income just selling into the local markets. You know, it matters. Let me give you an example. When a farmer sells his commodities normally, you have to go through the grocery store, and the farmers get about 18 cents for every federal dollar, every dollar they have. Sometimes you get less than that. But when a farmer sells locally, the farmers can get anything from 50 to 75 cents for the same exact product. In addition to producing renewable energy and taking advantage of the bioeconomy, the result of family farms that were barely making ends meet use these funds provided to improve their bottom line after being squeezed by big corporations for so long. Look, we're also promoting competition in agricultural markets. For too long, farmers like Brad and his brother and his dad, mom, have had to sell their hogs, not just a handful of meat processors. There was only a handful that existed. Outsized control over the industry, and they set the prices as well. Let me put this perspective to you. Just 4 big corporations control more than half the market in beef, pork, and poultry. And because so few companies control so much of the market, if one of those processing plants goes offline, it can cause massive supply chain disruptions, slowing production, and cost farmers big. It happened to Brad when processing plants shut down during the pandemic and he had to rely on social media to sell his hogs. Folks, look, there's something wrong when just 7% of the American farms get nearly 90%. 7% get 90% of the farm income. And most farmers rely on jobs off the farm to be able to make ends meet on the farm. When I took office, I decided to invest $1 billion through the American Rescue Plan in small and medium-sized independent meat processors to expand their capacity. And the folks who don't understand that, like the people here do, what happens is it improves competition. More people are competing for the product, so farmers get a fair price for their product. It's about basic fairness. Right now, the farmers and ranchers who actually grow the food only to see a small percentage of the profit when the food is sold. So we're strengthening local food systems. So rural communities have better access to affordable locally grown food. So the farmers who provide that food actually benefit from it. Through the bipartisan infrastructure law, it's a fancy name, but it's about rebuilding America's bridges, roads, highways, etc. We're making the most substantial investments in President Eisenhower's rural America since Eisenhower's highway plan. Roads, bridges, inland waterways, ports, regional airports, clean water, high-speed internet. We're building affordable high-speed internet for every household. Over 230,000 Minnesotans households are already saving $30 or more per month on their internet bills through the Affordable Connectivity Program. But I'm going to need your help. That program's running out of funds. I sent Congress a request for more funding, and they should act now, act on it now. We're also investing over $50 million to bring high-speed internet to tribal communities here in Minnesota alone. We're also making the largest investment in rural electrification since FDR, providing grants and loans to rural electric co-ops to supply rural communities with affordable, reliable, clean energy as well. Today, I'm proud to announce new funding that will go directly to rural communities. $1 billion to fix aging critical rural infrastructure like electricity, water, wastewater systems that haven't been replaced in decades. We're investing millions in building new bioeconomy and with homegrown biofuels, which will contribute nearly $3 billion to Minnesota's economy over every year as it saves as an important market for family farms to be able to do this. And folks, this is just a start. Today I'm announcing we're investing nearly $2 billion to help more farmers adopt practices to fight climate change and earn new income. We're investing $145 million for farmers in rural communities to install clean energy technologies like solar panels and lowering electric bills. An additional $274 million to expand rural high-speed internet even further. $2 billion to support communities in our Rural Partners Network, which puts federal employees on the ground to help rural communities take advantage of the federal resources, let them know what they are and where they are. We're also making sure rural America can compete with clean energy manufacturing jobs of the future. Earlier this year, I was in Minnesota, where we're over a century. Cummins built diesel engines and heavy-duty trucks and power generators, but now, thanks to the legislation I signed, the tax credit for clean energy, Cummins is converting its facility to make essential components for producing clean hydrogen used for cleaner production of everything from cars to trucks to steel to cement to manufacturing. And it's going to create thousands of jobs. In a place like Ohio and outside of Syracuse, New York, and all over the country, including in rural America, semiconductor companies are investing hundreds of billions of dollars, not a joke, hundreds of billions of dollars to bring chip production back home. You know, those little computer chips about the size of the tip of your little finger. We invented them in America. We made them more sophisticated, and we lost the ability to make them because we only had now 10% of the production. I went to South Korea to meet with Samsung and other groups. And I said, hey, look, why don't you come and invest in America? And guess what? The South Korean company came along and they're going to invest $200 million. We're $20 billion. We're going to invest over $350 billion in building these chips. And everything in our lives, from cell phones, automobiles, refrigerators, most sophisticated weapon systems, rely on these. I might add, the factory being used to produce these chips, they call them fabs, employ thousands of people. You know what the average salary in those factories is going to be? Over $100,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. That's the truth. All that means good jobs. Good jobs in rural America. The bottom line is this. Instead of exporting jobs overseas for cheaper labor, now we're creating jobs here and expanding American products and selling them overseas. Yeah. Folks, we're not only transforming rural communities, we're transforming our economy. A year ago, experts said a recession was almost guaranteed. Remember months ago, a recession's coming, a recession's coming. Well, guess what? Just last week, we learned the economy grew by nearly 5% the last quarter. Proving the experts wrong. Since I took office, we've created 13.9 million jobs since I was elected. We created more jobs in 2 years than any president has done in 4-year terms. And nearly 200,000 of those new jobs are right here in Minnesota. 200,000. Remember we were told we no longer be the manufacturing capital of the world? Well, guess what? We created 815,000 manufacturing jobs, twice as many as the previous administration. Where does it say we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? Where is that written? The unemployment rate has stayed below 4% for 20 months in a row, the longest stretch in 50 years. And inflation is coming down at the same time. It's down from 60%, it's down 60% since last summer. Core inflation is the lowest level in 2 years. We have the lowest inflation rate of any major economy in the world. Folks, all this is no accident. It's Bidenomics. And by the way, we got more to do. We got more to do. We're creating good jobs in communities across rural America, including in places where decades of factories that were open, that families worked at, got shut down. Towns were hollowed out. Jobs moved overseas. Over the past few decades, these communities lost more than jobs. They lost their sense of dignity, opportunity, pride. My plan is about investing in rural America. It's about something else as well. It's about restoring pride to rural communities that have been left behind for far too long. No, we really have. It's not hyperbole. For decades, families like Brad sat around the kitchen table with their kids and grandkids worried, wondering, how can we keep the farm in the family? Because of these investments we're making, family farms like this one will stay in the family, and the children and grandchildren like Brad won't have to leave home to make a living. When Brad sits around the kitchen table with his 4-year-old son and 20-month-old daughter, she'll understand it all right away. Who are here today, he doesn't have to worry about if the farm's going to stay in the family if they wanted to. Folks, Bidenomics is just another way of saying the American dream. 40 years ago, trickle-down economics limited the dream to those at the top. But I believe every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job, no matter where they live, in the heartland, in small towns, to raise their kids on a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. You know, my dad used to have an expression, for real, he'd say, Joey, I mean it sincerely, a job's more than about a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about pride. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. That's the American dream. That's Bidenomics. It's rooted in what always worked best for the country. Investing in America. Investing in America. And investing in Americans no matter where they live, in rural communities, tribal communities, suburbs, or cities. Because I believe a president is supposed to represent all American people, not just some Americans. Folks, here's the deal. It's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. Never, never, never. I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future than I am today. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. We're the United States of America. And think about this. We've always come out of every conflict we've gotten into, we've always had every problem we've had stronger than we went in. There's nothing beyond our capacity. Think about it. Anything we've ever set our mind to as a nation, we've never failed to succeed. Not a joke. Never failed to succeed. Nothing's beyond our capacity when we do it together. So let's unite this country. Let's do it together. Let's make sure that those who want to stay in the farm can stay as long as they want because they make a good, decent living. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for the introduction. Governor Jared Polis, where's the Gov sitting? There you go. Gov, thank you. You're doing a hell of a job. You really are for Colorado, and thank you for your leadership. And Nick, Mayor, the mayor here. You know, I walked off, stand up, Mr. Mayor, so they see you. I was on the plane. They came to meet me at the Air Force One. I'm on the plane. I'm on the phone talking with my national security team about the next tranche of prisoners being released. And I knew I was running late, so I came down the stairs of Air Force One and ran right to the car, ran right by the mayor, and everybody came to see me. Mr. Mayor, again, I want to publicly apologize for that. Thank you. And a good friend of mine, a guy who's been a great partner, and a guy who is doing so much for this community, John Hickenlooper. Thanks for being such a great partner, John. I really mean it. I said there's one word. I was introducing John at another event, and I said there's one word that can describe John Hickenlooper. The most important word for an elected official: integrity. He's a man of absolute, total integrity. Thank you, John. And Chairman of CS Wind, Kim, where are you? There you go, man. Thank you. We've had more picture taken together lately that he's probably going to hurt his reputation back home. But I am friends with your leader, Mr. Moon. Home. We're good guys. Thank you for all and I want to thank all the tribal leaders for joining. All the tribal leaders are here. If you're here, you stand. Can I see? I don't know where you are. Maybe I'm not here right now. And to celebrate this historic investment, building a clean energy future made in America is part of the progress we're making growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down. Because when the middle class does well, everyone does well. We're investing in America. We're investing in Americans, and it's working. Since I took office, my Investing in America agenda has led to manufacturing boom that's attracted over $600 billion. $600 billion in private investment from private companies in America and around the world, manufacturing and industries of the future. When I took office, we set a goal to produce 100% carbon-free electricity by 2035. And because of my commitment to clean energy future, Made in America clean energy companies started investing here in Colorado. Here in Colorado, CS Wind, a Korean company, makes towers and wind turbines. I know you all know it, but people seeing this on television may not be certain. They used to make all their wind towers abroad. Then they decided to make them here in America as well. And today, CS Wind Factory in Colorado is the largest wind tower manufacturer in the entire world. With over 870 employees. It's simple. As I've said for a long time, when I think climate, and I mean this sincerely, I think jobs. That's what climate's about. Not only saving lives and saving the environment, but jobs. But that's not the end of the story. I signed a historic law, the most significant investment combating existential threat of climate change ever anywhere in the world. It does many things, including provide incentives to make wind towers in America and bonuses for clean energy projects that use those American-made wind towers to power American homes. And because of my Investment in America agenda, CS Wind plans to invest an additional $200 million to expand the facility right here, another $200 million, doubling its production and creating 850 more good jobs beyond what's going on. And because of the investment and incentives we wrote into the law, CS Wind recently announced its employees will receive an end-of-year bonuses as well. You can clap for that, man. It matters. Like I said, when I hear climate, I think jobs. Here in Colorado, the wind turbine manufacturing Vistas is investing $40 million to expand its factory and hire an additional 1,000 employees. Solar manufacturer Meyer Burger is building a new solar cell factory just down the road in Colorado Springs. They'll create more than 350 new jobs themselves. And all across America, instead of exporting jobs, companies, both foreign and domestic, are creating jobs here in America and exporting American-made products. That's what we used to do 40 years ago. Through my bipartisan infrastructure law, we're also making most substantial investment in American infrastructure since President Eisenhower built the interstate highway system. We're investing in roads, bridges, ports, airports, clean water, affordable high-speed internet. Already, we've announced over 40,000 projects. 4,500 communities across the nation are benefiting. And from the new Amtrak tunnel in Baltimore to the Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky to right here in Colorado, $5.6 billion in 304 projects. We're investing $160 million in a 103-mile water pipeline known as the Arkansas Valley Conduit. It starts here in Pueblo and will bring water to 50,000 people across the southeastern Colorado. And that's not all. We haven't forgotten tribal lands here in Colorado. We're investing over $66 million in tribal lands here to ensure underserved Native American communities have access to affordable high-speed internet. The amazing thing is over 233,000 Colorado households already have a savings of $30 a month on their internet bills because of the Affordable Connectivity Program. You know, and as part of my commitment to conserve and restore our country's lands and waters, my administration already conserved more than 21 million acres nationwide, including when I was here a year ago at the Camp Hale Continental Divide National Monument, a beautiful place that will never, ever, ever be built on in future generations. We're also bringing the semiconductor manufacturing back home. We invented the computer chip. We invented the semiconductor. All those computer chips smaller than the tip of your finger that affect nearly everything in our lives, from cell phones to automobiles to refrigerators to advanced weapon systems. America invented these chips, but as time went on, we went from producing 40% of the world's chips down to just over 10%. That's why I designed and signed the Chips and Science Act, because how can we remain the greatest nation in the world without leading the world in science and technology? How does that happen? We used to invest 2% of our gross domestic product in research and development as a nation. That's why we're leading the world. Over time, that went down to 0.7%. But we're changing that. Now, all over the country, semiconductor companies are investing literally hundreds of billions of dollars to bring chip production back home to America. In Colorado Springs, the company Microchip announced it would invest $880 million to expand their manufacturing capacity, creating 400 additional good-paying jobs in the semiconductor industry. And the fabs, that's what they call the factories they build in, these fabs, they pay an annual salary over $100,000 a year. And guess what? You don't need a college degree to get the job. Folks, things are changing. We're also focused on growing the rural economy. Let me put this in perspective for you. Just 4 big corporations control more than half of the markets in beef, pork, and poultry in all of America. And because so few companies control so much of the market, if one of those processing plants goes offline, it can have a massive impact on the supply chain disruptions, slowing production, and cost farmers real big. Under my administration, Colorado has received millions of dollars to strengthen and expand access to small, mid-sized meat and poultry processors. The big guys don't like it, but guess what? You have a guaranteed access. Having facilities close by means farmers and ranchers have a better shot at getting a fair price for their product. We're also helping farmers and ranchers deploy clean energy systems like solar panels on their farms and ranches, lowering energy costs and increasing their incomes. When farmers and ranchers do well, when the wealth they generate stays in Colorado, when their children can stay in Colorado, it builds a stronger rural economy. And now, new data released just today shows the investments we're making have spurred by the Inflation Reduction Act, which I wrote, which we passed, is going to communities historically left behind. Since I signed the law, 99% of clean energy investments in Colorado are in counties with average incomes below average, below median household incomes. When I took office, I vowed I'd be president for all Americans, whether you live in a blue state or a red state, whether you live in rural or urban areas. And we're delivering on that promise. But folks, we haven't gotten a whole lot of help from some members of Congress. On the other side of the aisle, in the United States Congress. The historic investments we're celebrating today is in Congressman Boebert's district. She's one of the leaders of this extreme mega movement. She, along with every single Republican colleague, voted against the law that made these investments in jobs possible. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. And then she voted to repeal key parts of this law. And she called this law a massive failure. You all know you're part of a massive failure? Tell that to the 850 Coloradans who get new jobs in Pueblo and see us win thanks to this law. Tell that to the local economy that's going to benefit from these investments. Tell that to anyone who wants to listen. Tell, with thanks to Congressman, I think what she calls a massive failure, a solar power company that's investing $400 million here in Colorado, creating for 56,000 homes, create 250 good-paying jobs. LightSource BP is building a new solar farm just down the road from here to power an additional 53,000 homes. Across Colorado, Xcel Energy is investing $1.7 billion to improve the state's electric grid. And folks, none of that sounds like a massive failure to me. How about you? I mean, it's crazy. This is an incredible opportunity. I've gone around the plant today to those I got to talk to. You're changing America. You're changing America. It all sounds like a massive failure in thinking by the Congresswoman and her colleagues. Her Congresswoman also voted against the CHIPS and Science Act. And when she voted against the bipartisan infrastructure law, she called it garbage, a scam. And as a matter of fact, the new Republican Speaker of the House, along with Republican Congressman Vern Buchanan, just visited Sarasota, Florida yesterday to tour the construction of a new terminal at that airport. It's going to create thousands of jobs over time. The project is funded with nearly $30 million from the bipartisan infrastructure law. And it's going to generate more than $30 million for Florida multiple times over. And guess what? Both the Speaker and the Congressman voted against the law and spoke against the law. But now they're down there taking credit for it being built. As my mother would say, God love them. As one of my friends back home would say, that's real chutzpah. That's real chutzpah. Meanwhile, my predecessor wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Over 40 million Americans today get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. His plan is to throw them off that plan. That would mean the number of uninsured African Americans will go up by 20%, for Latinos will go up by 15%. Folks, this is not your father's Republican Party. Like I said, I made a promise to be the president for every American, and I'm keeping my promise. And just this morning we learned that our economy, just this new data out, our economy grew by over 5% in the last quarter. That's more growth. That's more than it grew under my predecessor in any quarter outside the pandemic, despite promises of massive tax cuts for the wealthy, and corporations would be, what they said, would supercharge the economy and trickle down to working folks. Not a whole lot trickled down on most kitchen tables I'm aware of. But when I took office, since then, the first 2 years, we created over 14 million brand new jobs, good paying jobs. And nearly 250,000 of those good-paying jobs are here in Colorado alone. We've created close to, remember we were told we're not going to be the manufacturing capital of the world. How can we be the manufacturing capital of the world again? Well, we've created close to 800,000 manufacturing jobs, almost twice as many as the previous administration did in all 4 years. The unemployment rate has stayed below 4% for over 20 months in a row, the longest stretch in 50 years, and we've seen the highest share of working-age Americans in the workforce in 20 years. And inflation is down. We have more work to do, but inflation is down at the same time. Core inflation is the lowest level in 2 years that we've had, the lowest inflation of any major country in the world. Let me be clear. Any corporation that's not passing these savings on to the consumers needs to stop the price gouging. And as my friend Senator Bob Casey from Pennsylvania calls it, greedflation. American people are tired of being played for suckers. Look at all the hidden fees you have. You find out, you call up your bank and you want to find out what the balance in your account is. They charge you $20. I can go on and on and on. It's wrong. One thing I said after we passed all these major pieces of legislation, it's the next big battle is going to be whether the very wealthiest among us begin, and the biggest corporations begin to start paying their fair share. I'm not talking about 80%, 70%, 90%. I'm talking about the highest tax rate in America is 38%, 36%. Let me be clear. The Speaker, Donald Trump, and the MAGA Republicans here in Congress are committed to protecting their outrageous tax cuts for those at the very top. And they're going to continue to oppose investing in all those programs that help people, whether it's in education, healthcare, or whatever. I have a different view. One of the ways that we paid for all those investments, and we paid for, and by the way, I cut the federal deficit of over $7 billion while doing all this. But one of the ways we paid for these investments is by making corporations begin to pay their fair share. Some of you may remember all the publicity back in 2020. 55 of the Fortune 500 companies in America made $40 billion in profits. That's good. You know what they paid in federal taxes? Zero. Not a penny. Not one penny. Because of the law I signed, billion-dollar corporations now have to pay a minimum of 15% of the federal tax. That's even less than you all pay. But they're paying zero before. That paid for all the work we did, and we have more work to do. Does anyone think the tax code's fair? If you do, raise your hand. I'm not joking. Even people doing well don't think it's fair. You know, we had about 750 billionaires in America before the pandemic. Now there are 1,000. You know the average rate those billionaires pay in their federal taxes? 8%. They make $1 billion and they pay 8%. Raise your hand if you pay more than 8%. Every one of you do. I'm serious. Think about this. I mean, just think about it. That's less than a firefighter or a teacher or so many other people pay. That's why I'm proposing a billionaire minimum tax. Get this. A billionaire minimum tax, not even at the highest rate, at 25%, which was a lot of you pay if you're making a family of four making $150,000 a year. If just 25% is still 10% lower than the top rate, and it would raise $440 billion over the next 10 years. Just paying 25% instead of 8%. Imagine what we could do if we just made these billionaires pay their taxes like everyone else. We could use it to strengthen the Social Security and Medicare system instead of cutting them, or like Congressman Trump and Bo want to do. We could use it to help millionaires and millions of families afford, instead of millionaires, millions of families afford a little help with senior care. How many of you have a mom or dad that they don't want to have to give up all the value in their home, sell it and go to a nursing home? But you know, if they just had someone there at dinner time to help them with the dinner, or just had them in the morning there, just a little bit, they could stay, save a lot of money, and be a hell of a lot happier. Or we could do, what would we do with child care? When we had that child care tax cut, what happened? We had the lowest poverty rate for children in the history of America. But what it does, it generates income. all those moms and single dads who are taking care of their kids, they're able to get a job, pay a tax, go to work, because someone can be with their child. Child care. This is not about helping poor folks. It's about smart economics. If we had another 5 million women working who can't work now, it generates economic income and growth in their communities. And all these ideas would be a hell of a lot better for growing the American economy than letting billionaires keep paying less taxes than any middle-class person or working person in America. Let me close with this. My plan is based on the belief that every American willing to work hard, and some don't want to work hard, but every American willing to work hard should be able to get a job, no matter where they live, in the heartland or in a small town, to raise kids in a good paycheck and keep their roots where they grew up. My dad, that's the God's truth. I know I apologize to Hickenlooper and others who heard me say it 1,000 times. My dad used to say, and I said, no, I'm deadly earnest. He'd say, Joey, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about being treated with respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. There are 250,000 more jobs in Colorado since I took office. That's 250,000 more people throughout this state, including in this district, who can look their kids in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay. That's what it's about. This is not any, they call it socialism. My plan is rooted in what we've always worked best for this country. Investing in America, investing in Americans. Because when we invest in our people, when we strengthen the middle class, we see stronger economic growth for all Americans, not just the middle class. Everybody grows, for real. Here's the deal. I've said this, and I've said this to Deng Xiaoping in the Himalayas, and I've said this to every world leader. It's never, never, never been a good bet to bet against the American people. Never, never, never. And I can honestly say, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I can honestly say, I've never been more optimistic about America's future than I am today. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. We're the United States of America. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we work together. So let's continue to work together, and God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. We're moving, folks. We're moving, and no one's going to stop us. Thank you.